So here we are. Council. We want to keep the video off?
Take it down a notch. Thank you. So tell us when you're ready. Great. It is now 7 o'clock. I know we have a couple people on here. Is some of our commissioners also? Okay, I see Commissioner Hart.
He's participating online.
Okay.
And we have
any other commissioners online?
no, Nick Adams is excused, Chris Harp is online, and Commissioners Bruce, Erdman, Hermans, Haniro, Kuhn, and Summers are present.
Thank you so much. Welcome to the Plan Commission. Today is March 26th. To those of you who are by Zoom, thank you for joining us. And to those of us who are in council chambers, thank you for joining us. I want to make sure we are recognizing our crowd today. As we've done roll call, we can move on to the minutes. Is there any changes or suggestions for the minutes of the Plan Commission of March 12th?
Madam Chair, I did have, this is Haniro, I did have one change to the minutes, and it's on page 12 of the packet. I'm pretty sure I asked the developer of Castle Rock to meet the lumens requirement, not the color temperature for the two fixtures. Because if I recall, Daphne said that the lights did meet the color temperature requirements. It was the lumens, the light output that was exceeded. That's the only correction I had.
Is that reasonable, Daphne?
Are you seeing it on page 12?
Oh, I see where.
It's after, it's in the motion.
It's not, no, the motion
Or
is
it's
correct. It's the text that's incorrect.
Yes, that's right.
Okay, that's my mistake, sorry.
So it's modify the light output. And then I just had a question about the CARP-C and environmental corridor overlay changes. And maybe this is something we'll talk about later. But it said, I had asked a question about the way our ordinance is worded. It sounds like it says the CARP-C environmental corridor map and other things that determine what our environmental corridor overlay is. Those things may change over time. And does that mean that the city doesn't have to take action to change the zoning code, or, the actual map of the overlay through official action, but rather an administrative change? And Mark, you said this merits consultation with the city attorney. And I was just wondering if we had new.
And I have not done that yet.
Okay, that's fine. Just wondering.
We have that on our list of zoning ordinance changes, and we're tracking some edits that we're going to need to make in the near future.
Okay,
So
thank you.
Thank you.
Any other changes? Hearing none, I'll adopt the minutes. I don't see that.
With that one change.
With the one change, thank you. I will approve the minutes. Moving on to agenda items. The first one is site plan review in-ground pool at 7438 Hunters Court. Can staff provide a little background for me?
Sure. Yes. So this is the first for Plan Commission because in our new ordinance, we discovered that, pools are, now part of the site plan review process. So it's any pool that has to be excavated deeper than 1 foot into the ground. This is about almost 4 feet. I believe it's 45 inches. It will be into the ground. It's a stock tank. There's a example photo of what it might look like. Is not the exact one, but something similar to this is what the homeowner is putting into the ground. And so this is, other than, the site plan review by Plan Commission, it follows all of our other setback requirements. So staff recommended approval. We also recommend possibly altering the adding to Mark's list of things to change in our ordinance. So, we don't have to bring these types of things to Plan Commission.
Very good. Is there a motion?
I have a question before a motion, please. Do you want us to direct staff to prepare an ordinance amendment? Or is this, this is the first time I've seen a pool come to us, but is that because it changed? and you were doing them administratively.
Right. Previously, we were doing them administratively, as long as it followed all the setbacks and, such that we have provided in the ordinance, especially on, single family home properties and stuff like that. We don't expect them to come to Plan Commission. So it is already on our list of things.
Okay.
If I can just elaborate, so the zoning ordinance that we have now was based on a template our consultant had used in other communities. And even though I went through the ordinance, obviously I missed a little detail here of, oh, this will take a commission review. We don't see a need to do that. There's no need to give us any, okay, just present that to you at a future meeting.
Okay. And just to be clear, I don't find fault with the staff for missing this. I mean, we've said all along, right, that we know there are things in the zoning code that will require changes. I've seen it said in places that, we should not be opening up the zoning code for anything. But like I said, we've always talked about how this is such a dense document. There's got to be stuff in there that we missed, and it looks like you found one. So thank you.
And to Daphne's credit, I'll speak for the three of us with Abby, not here tonight, but when we get inquiries that relate to the zoning ordinance, we check what we're making sure that we're dotting i's and crossing t's. And so that's how we're finding a couple of these things now. And you're not going to hear about the ones that aren't problems because, those are working. So it's pretty unusual to get a pool application, and it just happens to be right after we adopted the ordinance. Otherwise, things are going swimmingly.
I knew that was coming. Okay, on that, I will move approval of the pool site plan for the in-ground pool at 7438 Hunters Court.
Is there a second?
Second.
Good. Any comments? Hearing none, all those in favor of approving site plan review of the in-ground pool at 7438 Hunters Court, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Number 2, final plat, first addition to Red Tail Ridge between High Road and Pheasant Branch Road. I'm going to ask staff to provide some background.
Certainly, Mayor. Wade Wise is here also representing the developer in case you have any questions. He has his hand up. I did receive from him today, and Chad Whitten too. Thank you. Daphne is available. He's the developer. He's available via Zoom. So I'm sorry. So this is the initial staff comments on this plat to the final plat to the first edition. This whole area, as you'll recall, Red Tail Ridge had a preliminary plat, and so they are now platting the different phases as they go. And so these orange boxes are comments from our engineering staff. And in response to this, I had asked the development team to respond to a couple of the concerns. And in particular, the one that is at the bottom of the screen, Bellefontaine Boulevard and Lynette Lane, the intersection spacing was a concern. So Daphne, if you could please pull up the other drawing. So we'd received this earlier today from Wade. And it's a little bit hard to see, but maybe Wade, if it's all right with you, Mayor, if he can just quickly explain what they did here.
Yes, please.
Thanks, Mark. So I think the takeaway, am I on? Everybody, okay. I think the takeaway in the change is the connection to Bellefontaine, as was stated in the comments, was roughly 230 feet center line to center line. The access guideline suggests 300 feet, although I think that's something that can be discussed. Our proposal would be to eliminate Lynette Lane's connection to Bellefontaine and to put a backloaded alley along the backside of those lots with a north-south public street, if you can see in the middle west section of the plat in the red lines on the graphic that I sent.
Where it says public street, yeah.
Yep. So there's an added linear footage of street costs, both private and public. And the loss in saleable lots in that layout is 2. So we're able to accommodate the spacing request made by engineering at the loss of 2 lots and the added costs of the additional street construction.
Thank you for doing this. This is actually what I had in mind, but I was wondering, could you go into the outlots those are for stormwater purposes?
They are.
And I know they're probably designed to be a specific area, but I was wondering if there's a way to reduce the impact on the number of lots by changing something in the stormwater.
Unfortunately not. We'll continue to study that. I'm sure Chad would like that as well, but no, right now we are maxed out.
It's,
Well, because you would add, you now would have that piece of land between Bellefontaine Boulevard and the end of Lynette Lane. Yeah, that would be
Yeah.
added property.
Correct. To the stormwater.
Yeah.
Yeah, we do have a little bit of add where the street cut through. So right now, some of those lot spacings, we reduced to make this layout work. We reduced some of those lot spacings by 3 to 4 feet.
Okay.
So we probably will get that back, and that north-south line that's shown conceptually will slide west.
Okay.
so that I was thinking along the same lines, Lisa, but my thought was just to terminate Lynette Lane where the original proposed alley, I think it's a north-south alley. Yeah. And convert that alley to a public street and just have that be the public street there, which would not, you wouldn't lose any lots that way. You would have to decrease the width of the outlots. And maybe, there'd be a trade-off in areas. I don't know, but that would seem like another solution that would be possible as well.
So good feedback, and I think it's worth discussion. Our concern with that, and I think it's going to be echoed by Public Works and Sean's group, is the spacing, the width of the outlot. As a public street, the spacing isn't quite there before you get to Bellefontaine.
I see. Right. I get it. Mhm. Well, I think your proposed solution is a good one. The only concern I had with this idea was from Bellefontaine is the exposure of all the alley-loaded garages from Bellefontaine, and I didn't know if there's anything that's possible along the outlot or in the outlot in terms of landscape screening there, or is that all going to be just stormwater management and no vegetation?
We can look closer at the sizing to see if we can squeeze some landscaping in. In the current layout, it is all stormwater.
Any other thoughts?
There was a question about the park access at the north side of the park. Have you resolved that?
Yeah, so the lots, if I remember right, 74 through 77 there.
Yeah.
Those, another part of this access control, were requested not to access Bellefontaine. And as such, the private street, or wax wing, I think it's called, would extend along the back side of those and create rear loading for those lots as well. And that would allow us the opportunity to bring the pedestrian access from the north to the parks as requested.
Is there going to be a sidewalk as part of that?
That would be the idea. We've got, I think it's like a 30-foot private street right now. So we'd have like a 24-foot drive and a sidewalk adjacent to bring that pedestrian connectivity through there.
Has Mark or Daphne, has staff reviewed that yet?
No, we haven't seen a drawing that addresses this concern. Unless that was on the one you submitted today.
Yeah, it's in red. I'm sorry, it's in red. It's hard to see on ours, but
Oh, there it is.
Yep,
Okay.
you can see that extension of that private street to address that comment. It's kind of killing two birds with one stone there, right? We're getting the rear loading and providing the outlet connectivity to the park.
And the sidewalk would be along this,
Along the access drive, yeah.
which
Which side of it?
Uh,
The
I-
garage side or the stormwater side?
I guess it'd be the east side.
Yeah,
Probably the
side.
east side.
Hopefully the
We
east
don't
side.
have it drawn up yet. It's just concept at this point on a plat diagram, but we'll study that and see what makes most sense.
Would there be a terrace between the private street and the sidewalk, or would that be street sidewalk?
I think it'd be street sidewalk just because of the width that we have for that private street. By loading those not on Bellefontaine and creating a private street, we didn't want to lose a lot along that south run of lots there. So we're really squeezing things in to accommodate both.
I'd like to just point out for your consideration that when there's street sidewalk and garages with driveways, you get these ramps through the sidewalk every time that a driveway cuts through there, and that's very difficult for people with strollers and handicapped people. And it's also very difficult to clear the snow in a nice way. And so that makes it very difficult for pedestrians to actually use that sidewalk when they're through terrace.
I think that's totally a fair comment, and I think that's why we'd lean to the east side for the sidewalk, but let us look at that because we know it's squeezed. So
Does Thrasher Street, that does not provide access to the park, does it?
No, that's a future phase.
That's a future phase?
Yeah.
Correct.
But will it in the future? I can't remember how that.
There are lots along
Oh, I
Thrasher
see,
in
along the
future.
backside.
Yeah.
Okay, yep.
Any more thoughts?
I had a question about engineering's comments on page 21 of the packet. Sounds like because hooded Merganser Drive is a connector, it should have 300-foot centerline curve radii, not 200 feet, which is for neighborhood streets. Am I understanding that?
So this is interesting. I believe, we saw the comment as well. I believe the ordinance suggests 200 is acceptable, 300 is preferred and what was shown on the preliminary plat.
Okay.
So I think it's still something we should discuss. We've shown in our graphic that we just sent today, 300-foot radii, and the result is a loss of 2 additional lots. So if we hold the ordinance minimum of 200, we get those 2 lots back. If we hold the preliminary plat reference and city engineering's desire, we lose 2 additional lots.
And that's something you could provide feedback on today as a commission. It would be very helpful. You're not
So
making
our-
a final decision today, but if you are
Right.
comfortable with 200, that's fine.
So our current new zoning code, no,
Doesn't it, that would be a
It's
subdivision. code.
subdivision
Yeah.
code that has not been changed
Update,
yet.
right.
Okay. What direction would we head in for that? Any idea?
I mean, I think our trend over the last couple decades is to have narrower streets and allow some curves as a way to have traffic calming. Some engineers may disagree with that view, but if you look at neighborhoods like Hidden Oaks and Middleton Hills and Bell Farm, I think we are finding that designing streets that are more pedestrian friendly instead of having these sweeping radii is acceptable. And I would be personally, I'm fine with that. As was noted in the staff comments, the engineering comments, there was some discretion. Did they indicate a preference of 300? I think that was what we saw, but I have no objection to 200.
Okay. And then also the driveway from Magpie Trail needs to be at a right angle to the street. Is that,
We've updated that.
you have?
Yep.
Okay. Did you lose anything with that?
We did not lose a lot. We just maybe changed the product that goes there.
And about the Bellefontaine's curve radii was 200 feet versus the 450 foot that was in the ordinance, I believe. And you've made an adjustment to that as well?
I can't say I remember that specific comment, but Bellefontaine in its location was a very hot topic of discussion. And as it's drawn on the plat, both in the modified version and the original one I submitted, was worked out with city staff.
Okay. Mark, I thought I saw one of Sean's comments on Bellefontaine was to adjust that curve radii.
I don't recall where that is at the moment.
I might be, I could,
I know the issue with Bellefontaine was, originally the thought was we would well, there was at one point a concept to shift it. Oh, there it is down there. Oh, that's the intersection spacing.
Yeah.
yeah.
Where, so you don't know where you saw that, Commissioner Bruce?
No, I don't know offhand. I was just tracking his comments.
Chad, Chad has his hand up. Maybe, Lisa,
Oh,
maybe you could
yes.
recognize Chad.
Chad, go ahead. Chad, you can speak. Can you hear me?
He's muted.
We can't hear you.
Well, he nodded his head.
He's on.
Chad, give us a thumbs up if you can hear us. Okay. Do you want to say something? Well, we can't hear you.
He's muted.
Oh,
Yeah, he's
it
unmuted.
says you're unmuted.
Now it says he's muted.
Now you're muted. Okay, well, while you work that out, I will ask a question. And that is, what's going on page 27 of the packet?
Oh, you can disregard that now.
Okay, thank
That
you.
was, so at the time I hadn't heard back from the developer. I had sent them this last week and I think there was a vacation. And so when I didn't hear back from them, I just did my own little drawing that I put in there. I had forgotten that I put that in there. So you can disregard that.
Okay, and then we're waiting there for Chad to work out his mic problems. I noted in the memo, it said, or actually, I think this was engineering comment, with the many differences of this plat from the preliminary plat, the city should consider whether to request a revised preliminary plat. Thoughts from staff?
What page are you on right now? I'm sorry.
Somewhere between page 20 and page 27. It's one of the engineering comments. And I guess my question is that I understand crossing Ts and dotting Is, but how does the planning staff feel about this?
Before you do that, as Chad is trying to work on his microphone, we have found that leaving and then coming back sometimes make it happen. And Mark Opitz noted last time that sometimes you can call in if say your
Mhm.
person here can put you on speaker into the microphone. So 2 workarounds that I've learned in the last month.
So Alder Hanero,
Oh,
you're asking about.
I'm sorry, it's on page 20 at the top.
Are we on the screen, right?
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah. So the issue is whether we need to revise the preliminary plat. I think it's borderline as far as I'm concerned. I guess I'm okay still as long as there's cooperation from the developer and acceptance of these changes and we take care of that by next meeting. The way Sean wrote it was to consider whether to request a revised
Yep.
preliminary plat. I'm willing to say that we're pretty consistent. But if you have, I mean, that is something the plan commission could use your discretion if you feel that it's substantially different. I believe I put the preliminary plat in here. Did I put that in the packet?
You don't?
Okay, yeah.
Okay.
So, Wade,
I'm more concerned about, like you said, Mark, having the developer follow up on the comments
right.
on the final plant. So that
I'm not looking to create more work. I just wanted to make sure that we address the comments and to the city's concerns, to the city's satisfaction.
Just while we're waiting for Chad, perhaps, as far as the hooded Merganser Drive, I'm okay with it, the decreased radius. I think for that street, it seems fine. And I don't want to lose any more lots. They've lost some lots already.
right.
Excellent point.
Mhm.
Chad, any chance your microphone's working? No, we cannot hear you.
And as far as the radii for the Bellefontaine, at this point, I'll let that staff comment remain and let the applicant work that out with staff if it, in fact, there's a change is required. I would like to see the pedestrian access provided, if it's going to be provided along the private street, that it be, well marked, or at least, obvious to the public, since it is on the private street, and then to be on the east side of the street so that we minimize the number of crossings for that sidewalk.
Also, that be maintained in the winter.
Yeah.
When it's a private street, that's been an issue.
I think that would be appropriate to show that as a public access easement. Yeah, is that your intent?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
Chad, you may want to go ahead and call.
You know, isn't he a speaker later?
Yes, yes.
I can, we don't have an. Oh,
Can you guys hear me now?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, I switched computers.
Hang on, I gotta.
Okay, Kari,
Sorry for the problem.
Kari can mute unless that's Chad talking.
That's Chad.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, I just need to turn my back. Oh, here's one. Okay. Had to go back to the PC, which hurts me. Couple of comments. I'm not sure about this, Mr. Bruce, but I think the other's comment was referring to Junco Drive, not necessarily Bellefontaine. It's at the top of that first page.
That could be. That's possible.
And I don't know that, I think we can, wait, can we accommodate that one pretty readily or
Yes.
not?
Yes, we
Yeah.
can accommodate the change to Junco.
Yeah, so that shouldn't really be a concern. We can manage that. One more question that I have for you guys is that one of the comments is that we should have temporary cul-de-sacs in 2 different locations. But the city ordinance doesn't require them there, so I just wanted to get your opinion on that, and they won't be there for very long, so it's just kind of a waste of money for a year's time.
That is something that our city engineer pointed out to me today too. He's willing to be flexible on that, but he did note that we have examples in the city where we end up not having sufficient cul-de-sacs that stay in place for a long period of time. Whittlesey Road comes to mind. In Alder and Niro's district. So that is the concern, but we're obviously seeing a strong demand for sales, and I'm sure the next phase will not be far behind. So I think we're reasonably comfortable that this is a very temporary situation. I think there needs to be, given that they're only 1 lot deep or 2 lot deep. You put cul-de-sacs in the initial plat, right? The initial.
We did because they exceeded the length and the 2 lot minimum.
Right.
There's no cul-de-sacs here, just following the subdivision ordinance.
And so I'm fine with not requiring a cul-de-sac in either case.
Yeah, I would add that also in District 6, Misty Valley Drive doesn't have, I don't think there's a cul-de-sac at the end of that,
That's a good point.
or at the end of Bellefontaine Boulevard where it ends. So I'd be comfortable without.
So do we need to make, or should our motion address those 2 cul-de-sacs?
I don't even think I said that you should. I said provide feedback. I don't know that you need to make a formal motion. I've been documenting your feedback, and we can just take this up at the next meeting.
So we'll see the revised
Yeah.
final plat at the next
Yeah.
meeting? Okay. And I know Chad's going to be on later, but I just wanted to call attention to the phrase attainable home ownership option. And to that I say, yay, why aren't more houses built with this shared wall concept? I wish there would be more, and I look forward to hearing later from you, Chad, about how that how that's possible and what we can do to incentivize that.
I just want to make one more comment now that I have a microphone, if you don't mind. I just want to point out, and it's your call, obviously, but Lunette Lane, I know it seems like a minor change, but we lose 2 lots and we have to add 200 feet of road, and road costs $1,300 a foot. And I'm not complaining for me, but I'm trying to keep things at the attainable level. And I just want to point that out. So this isn't just a little thing. It's a $500,000 problem that has to be absorbed to some degree amongst the rest of the lots. And like I said, I'm just sharing my opinion. It's your call. We could do it either way, but we're talking about 60 feet and $500,000. So I just wanted to point that out to you. And, you know, I don't know that often dollars get thrown around very often in front of you guys because it doesn't feel right to do that, but it's a reality. And it's just all part of trying to create this attainable housing. Little things like that make a big difference. And unfortunately, there's layers and layers of little things from the start to the finish of all these projects. And it just, after a while, it adds up in a hurry. So I just wanted to make that comment, and I appreciate your other comments tonight.
God, thank you for sharing that and for sharing your experience in motion. That's something we can all keep mindful of, and we appreciate that. Also, I want to say thank you to Commissioner Bruce for asking about the motions. We're always trying to move things, so I'm glad we clarified, and it's a feedback portion. So I appreciate that. Is there any other, do you need anything else to move forward?
I will simply say, no need for motion, but if you feel there's an area where there's different opinions at the commission level, then a motion would be helpful. If you feel there's a need to, but if you feel this was, there was agreement all around, then I would think a motion's lessened.
I would ask the other commissioners how they feel about the comment Chad just made about closing off, you know, the option to close off Linnet Lane so that there wouldn't, you know, what was it, 60 feet is the difference. And this is a PDD, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, and I think a PDD, I think the rules around a PDD certainly apply to the non-public portions of the development. I feel a little different about the public works issues here. I'm assuming that our ordinance regarding access to collector streets was well thought out. And I'm certainly understand Chad's comments about the costs. There are obviously cost implications to this change, as well as numerous other requirements that are part of the development process. But I think this is a reasonable solution that he's proposed here, and I'd be supportive of that.
For perspective, if I may, the measurement between intersections on High Road by Middleton Hills is approximately from the curb of one intersection, the southern curb of one intersection to the northern curb of the next, if you will, or actually, let's say between crosswalks, is approximately 250, 245 feet along High Road, just for context, Alderman Iro.
Okay.
All right, any final thoughts?
And I would add that if I may editorialize, I'm not aware of any problems with that. I guess I would add that to make your point.
Well, and I'm also wondering again about the definition of collector versus, what was the other one? Neighborhood street. And we don't have Sean on the line.
No.
I'm just wondering if there's something that can be done to Linnet Lane to make it not a collector.
It's not Lynette, that's the collector, it's Bellefontaine is the issue.
Oh, so any access on a collector that's less than the spacing needs to be, okay.
If I can add to just one of the thought, lots 74 through 77, we removed access to Bellefontaine. We think that comment is totally appropriate as a collector street. For the civil engineer on the project, we think there could be further discussion about the 230-foot spacing for Lynette Lane as kind of the compromise, getting rid of the private one, but maintaining the public one. Less impervious, more green, better layout.
Well, I still, going back to Chad's comment and then Commissioner Bruce's earlier comment, I still wonder, could outlets 14 and 12 be squeezed a little bit to make, and, adjust something within the stormwater management facility there, to make way for a wider, or a street right there and close off Lynette Lane?
Mhm.
Because
Yeah.
that would seem like you wouldn't lose any lots doing that.
Close off Lynette Lane from Bellefontaine.
Yes, but make that private road go all the way through. So that would be the access to get to either Red Pole or Junco
And
Drive.
I think,
That is possible.
I think what the applicant mentioned was that perhaps that intersection, the new intersection, that street, the new street that would terminate Lynette Lane at Junco Drive and at Red Pole might be too close to Bellefontaine,
Mm,
That's right.
and that would pose a problem.
Okay.
If this is coming back to us, and it seems like staff hasn't had a chance to really review your proposed layouts, I would just ask that the applicant work with engineering staff to continue to resolve these items.
Yes, for sure. I think that one of the things that's happened is we've gotten smaller lots. The 300 feet, if you have two sections of 150 feet deep lots, then it's a lot easier. But when we try to build more efficiently on less dirt, all of a sudden the distances don't add up to 300 feet anymore. And, I don't know when that ordinance was passed or when that rule was decided, but I think the world's changed a little bit. And again, that's just my commentary, but it's your call.
I think that's an excellent observation, and in some ways, what you're saying is that by going to the smaller lots and consistent with single-family high-density zoning, that's resulting in closer intersection spacing than what our traditional suburban subdivision ordinance standard was.
Yeah, and we run into that quite a bit when we try to do this in a new way or try to be creative with land use. Some of the old ordinances or some of the long time traditions, for lack of a better term, they don't apply, and that's where you have to kind of break through some of those once in a while. But I'm hearing that you don't want the intersection on Bellefontaine, and we can certainly work in that direction. I just wanted to have a chance, which I just did, to explain so that for future use or whatever, that it is kind of a big deal.
How does this spacing compare to the neighborhood around the high school, Maywood Avenue North?
I used the example of High Road at Friendship and Harmony and Phil Lewis, those intersections, just because that is more comparable with an alley loaded system on one side. By the high school, those lots would be a little deeper.
Okay.
I mean, I haven't measured them, but just if you'd like, I can quickly do that. But so if you're coming down Park Lawn, is that what you're thinking? Park Lawn, and then the spacing of those intersections?
Mhm.
I'm guessing those are going to be a little bit more. I can give you an answer very shortly. They might be comparable because there's no alley there. Oops.
I think ours about 90 feet.
All right, I'm measuring now. It's about 290, 300 feet almost.
Mhm.
So
Is on-street parking allowed in this neighborhood?
the question, Wade, is on-street parking. Are these? They'll be part of how wide is Lynette? I can't remember.
It's 30.
33s. Yeah, so there's plenty of room for parking. In fact, I hadn't realized that these were so wide. Oh, that's the right of way though. That's the right.
The
of
right of way
way.
is a
Yeah,
typical
yeah,
66, so
exactly.
there's no reason to think that there wouldn't be.
What's the curb to curb?
I don't have it up top.
Okay.
I'd have to pull it up.
Are we talking a 36-foot wide street, do you think?
Yeah.
That's plenty wide to have two parking on each side. I'm actually surprised the street's that wide, to be honest.
Yeah, there's 66-foot right of ways. That was
Well, there's 60-foot right of ways.
60.
Yeah, 60 feet it says.
You're right. There's 60, Mark.
Okay, so I think you've had enough feedback. I'll just say if there's something in Middleton Hills that is comparable, it's comfortable, I'm open-minded. Make sure we can get our houses in, make sure you can get people in and park their cars, make them happy. I do appreciate this because there's a lot of housing going in and you have a plan and you're moving forward. So keep working with our engineers and our plan commission,
Would
our
you like
planning
the,
staff. Yes,
would you like the final plat to show Lynette Lane going through, or would you like the revised version? I guess to speak directly to Alder Haniro's question.
Alder Haniro, what are you thinking?
Well, it's not just up to me. I think the commissioner needs to decide. I could consider having, well, if there are analogs elsewhere in the city where this is done safely, I could consider not making the change.
And that's why I had suggested that they continue discussing with staff.
Yep.
Okay,
Right.
yeah, that's
with it.
fine.
Mhm.
So that if the staff still feels that we need to maintain the ordinance required spacing, then I think my position is we'll maintain it. If the staff feels comfortable with an alternative, either this one that's proposed or other alternatives, whatever, then go that direction.
I think that's fair. Yeah, is everyone else? We're comfortable with that, so just keep working with staff, please.
Okay. Thank you.
All right, moving on to request to rezone property south of 7621 Terrace Avenue, west of 1726 Aurora Street, and rezone 7617 Terrace Avenue to downtown mixed use, MUD. Staff, can you please provide some background?
Sure. So this was deferred from the last meeting due to the rezoning, and then you wanted us to circle back with CARPC to see if their thoughts on the environmental corridor. Abby met with CARPC and they basically said that the city has to make that decision, and then once the city makes the decision, they will decide to either remove the environmental corridor or not. Also, last week, Abby met with the developers. Anne and Jake are here tonight. And so they also came up with this alternative concept, which let me pull it up real quick.
Can the developers raise your hand?
They're back.
Thank you.
And basically, instead of using the Middleton site, they would kind of go over our city-owned parking lot on next to the skate park and do something similar to, Trader Joe's, where, that first floor is public parking and then there's, residential up top. We've heard from some residents that they are, more they like this concept a lot more just because it doesn't go into the environmental corridor. And they would really like for this, the Middleton site to be preserved as conservancy. And so there's a question about, is this institutional or conservancy land? And because of the zoning, the water utility uses a big portion of that for the actual Quarry Park area that's further south of this site. They use it for a lot of water maintenance, utility maintenance stuff. And so that was why staff had zoned it as institutional instead of conservancy, but we don't see any issues with having this as conservancy and then relooking at some of those other parcels to change back into conservancy for preservation of the woodlands.
Okay, thank you for that.
And I would note that actually the former zoning was R1 for the entire area, which was single family, but obviously wasn't used for that purpose. So this actually would be taking it a step further. Institutional allows conservancy uses, but to rezone it, actually conservancy would limit it even further. So it's not going back to conservancy as much as it would be taking another step.
Okay, thank you for that. Can I ask the developer to come forward? I just have a clarifying question or a few. Thank you for coming forward. Is this on the screen? Is this a feasible construction for you and your team?
Yeah, so since we last met, we did have some productive conversations with CARPC. I think it matches the city's understanding of their view towards this site. We also have been working with Wisconsin DNR to confirm our understanding of the site. The idea, to put it simply, is to maybe trade what is the Middleton site for the parking site and replace public parking in a new development. And I do think that's feasible. I want to echo the developer who came before us to say, like, none of this is, free. We have to redesign the project. But that's okay. I think we're really actually glad to hear that so many neighbors are in support of this idea. And I think us who are architects and designers or who deal with them know that I think this is much better urban design. Right now, surface parking lots on main streets are like the missing teeth of our landscape for pedestrians. And if we can create a more cohesive streetscape along Terrace Avenue, get the city the parking it wants for the public use, and make more conservancy land, I do think that's a win-win-win. And we would certainly work towards that goal with your support. So, we have some work to do.
Yes.
But we do think it would create a better fabric for downtown Middleton.
Okay, stay right there.
Okay.
Please. For the folks in the audience, you've seen this thought. I'm going to ask you to raise your hand if you're more happy with this option. Please raise your hand. Okay, so we still have some folks who are maybe not there yet, or you're not here for this. Raise your hand if you're not here for this project. Okay, 3. All right, so we still have some ways to go, but there's some more okay with this idea. That's a start.
I think you received some letters from some of the folks that, we're not their best buds, but they were not happy with it before and now are really supportive of this as well.
Starting to get there. I saw that. That was positive. So there's still a ways to go and more information. And the other thing, and I'm sorry, I'm talking. I usually let you all talk, but I want to make sure with blasting techniques. Now, I know that they're about to blast near, is it PDD?
PPD,
PPD. They're doing some apartments. That's not your development. It's a different development near Greenway Station. And they have to have really sensitive blasting techniques in order to not dramatically impact that business. And the reason I bring this up is that for each of you, your home, that is as important as to any businessman, his business, right? That is your structure. That is where you live. And so there are blasting techniques. And I just want to ask the developer if what you've done in past locations, and I say that because I believe that you did the Monroe Street Arts Building in Madison, and having dropped off at summer school, for all those you don't know, I have small children. And when you pull up, there's a parking lot, there's the building, and there's a house literally right there. And so for folks who are uphill, your house is going to be right behind it. So since you have experience doing infill, can you share a little bit on those blasting techniques too? I'm sure.
Yeah, I'm not going to pretend to be a excavator here. I will say in the Monroe Street example, that house is right next to our site. There's a huge conservancy land between this site as Terrace Avenue and the houses on Hillcrest. And we had some pictures last time that showed the distance. So it's really not right behind them,
Not
though
the
it's
same.
certainly part of the neighborhood.
Yeah.
But, obviously blasting and excavating are highly regulated activities. With this alternate plan, certainly less, if any, is required, because you can see the extent of it in terms of, a lot of these lots you're looking at now that are highlighted in blue are already developed. So if any blasting was required, which I don't know what it would be yet because we have not explored the city's land, it would certainly be done with licensed, qualified, highly regulated contractors, and it is done routinely. But I don't know if it's required here, and the distance here is a lot greater than most of the sites we work on, which are really, really, really tight. This one, from our experience, actually has quite a bit of room to maneuver, and we would, take as little room to maneuver as we required.
And last, the hours of operation for the day and drop off after school, is that something we could work around for future if there is blasting or needs to things? If you could work with those neighbors.
We would certainly, again, not knowing, if it's required, we would like to work with neighbors, to the extent we can to try to accommodate them. So if it's, I know nap time, et cetera. The Monroe Street project that you referenced, we actually had our contractor service crossing guards to help people to add extra crossing guard capacity during the crossing guard shortage. So we're definitely willing to work with our neighbors to try to figure out solutions. So that's a good suggestion.
I appreciate you working with those neighbors, and I hope to see that continued working with. So thank you for offering that. Does anybody else have anything? So I know we got a lot of emails, and I want to make sure that we are covering any topics.
Well, I just would reiterate that I think this alternative idea, it really has some merit. I like the idea of getting, building up over the parking lot, the existing parking lot. And I really like the idea of not going into the Middleton site with construction. I think that was the more problematic portion of your previous proposal. So I would encourage the city to work with the developer to do what we can to make this come to fruition.
I concur. When looking at doing any sort of rezoning change, I look to see if that's consistent with our comprehensive plan. This is far more consistent. Now we are enhancing our conservancy, and we are restructuring a surface lot, which is something that we're trying to get rid of. Additionally, even just using the Trader Joe's as an example leads me to the hope that we could get a grocery store downtown. And I've been pressing for this my entire time on the Planning Commission, that Middleton as an entire community is a food desert. We have like 2 grocery stores, and we cannot try to serve pedestrian purposes without having the things that people need to be able to walk to. So the hope that we could potentially get a small grocer in there is just amazing. And I'm fully in support of this. I've gotten a lot of emails in support of this new project, a lot of emails very much opposed to the previous one. So yes, I've completely changed my support for this. It's consistent with the comprehensive plan now.
I would agree with my fellow commissioners. I like this option far better. I know it doesn't resolve all the concerns by a show of hands, but the fact that we can resolve some is much better. I have a question for city staff. So right now, this parking lot is not paid parking. It's widely used for events, especially Capitol Brewery, and including Art Walk that I help organize. My concern is that this will become more dominated residential parking, primarily from guests of people living there. Is there any way you're thinking, I know this is very early planning, but is there any way to regulate that? Like in the Trader Joe's example, that's paid parking, right? And I don't know that we want to go
Oh,
that
we have
way
to,
in public
yeah.
parking in Middleton, but just to make sure, I know there are other public parking options, but those are usually then below ground. People are always talking about how, finding public parking. So that's
Mhm.
just one concern to note.
Yeah, we have not really, thought about, how to regulate that as well. Yeah, it is something to consider because I know, they're also going to have their own underground parking area as well on top of the surface area. So that's something we can take into account moving forward.
Yeah, even something like an hourly limit, so it's not
Right.
all day parking there.
We are the largest manager of parking with our other organization, ULI. And so we can also give some thought to how we regulate that or how it would
Listen to the developers and the
design.
politicians.
Sorry.
Can you mute?
I would add too that I think it's 10 parking spaces, maybe it's 8, but 8 or 10 of the parking spaces are actually assigned for use by Middleton Station across the street. So a lot of discussions have to be had.
Yeah, and I think Chris Laurent registered in the previous iteration in support, and we will certainly reach out to him. I think we haven't gotten very far in our exploration. I think we were waiting for this kind of feedback, but we understand that some of them are leased, that there would be a construction period, that there are a lot of little details to work out. But at least he's someone we've known for a long time and respect what they do. So we'll work with them if we can.
Thank you. The one thing I want city staff to help me with is to get that CDA meeting on the schedule because that parking lot is a CDA parking lot. We were going to talk about that shared access before. I think there are 8 members on that committee. So some of them will not know about this new setup. So let's get that on the schedules because if even some of the neighbors are supportive of this, we still have to go through that second step of the CDA before we can have continued talks. So it's just pausing for now, at least that portion. But I want to make sure that everyone understands that that would be one of the next steps is that CDA meeting. Okay.
Thank you. I just want to agree with my colleagues in the room. I think this is a much better proposal. I recognize that this is not a development that will be on a corner, but I do hope that you'll consider ways to work in the commercial element. For the staff, I'm wondering, the developer can't dedicate the Middleton parcel as parkland, correct? Because it would be technically conservancy. Like that parcel, that quarter acre couldn't be part of
towards their parkland dedication. I think so. I would have to check our parkland dedication. The ordinance that talks about that again. But I'm pretty sure there's a clear distinction between conservancy and parkland.
Okay. And there's no chance of turning the Quarry Hill Conservancy into like a nature park to make this a dedication of parkland?
That is something we'll have to take up with our parks director. I believe in all of their plans, it is conservancy. It's not a park, but I would have to double check on that and check with Kylie. Yeah.
Okay. I also wonder if someone can explain, so the parking lot is owned by the city, correct? But it's managed by CDA?
Yes.
Okay. So I think whatever motion we make should indicate our desire to see the CDA agree with this change or with this concept, because I think it, for all the reasons that the other commissioners have given. I appreciate the staff stating what the requirements are that the developer would need to meet when submitting a site design plan for review, if we get to that point. Zoning. Okay, so we would not have to do anything with the Middleton zoning. The staff memo and the agenda indicate rezoning the 7617 Terrace Avenue or Mariner site to downtown mixed use, contingent upon that approval of council of the flu map. What about the parking lot? That would need to be changed because according to our zoning map, the parcel that includes, it looks like it includes the parking lot and maybe the skate park is, according to the zoning map, it says its current zoning is MUD and its future land use is conservancy, which I didn't think mapped to MUD.
I'm not aware that that future land use map shows conservancy.
It rings a bell.
I think
Yeah,
it
I'm
just
just
shows
going-
the environmental corridor.
Right. Well, no, I'm looking right at the, if you go pull up the zoning map, it's that parcel and it
Does
says
say
it does say there's the environmental corridor, but it also says current zoning is MUD and future land use is conservancy, which must be a mistake because you can't have,
I think it's because it's one lot, the whole, right? So it has to be subdivided out, which I think is in the staff memo. Sorry, I should stop talking. You can't give me a microphone.
well, so I bring this up because obviously we'd need to make a flu map change to this, although not a zoning change. And then the other thing I was going to suggest is that, and maybe we don't do this tonight and we wait until the next meeting, but I think the city should request a minor amendment to remove the environmental corridor designation from the parking lot and the skate park, because having those two included in our environmental corridor sort of makes a mockery of the whole concept of environmental corridor. And whether we do that tonight or wait and see if there's a reason to, have CARPC or have someone evaluate this entire environmental corridor area to see if it really qualifies or if there are endangered species on the site.
But this would be just the Vern's spot, the parking lot and the skate park, right?
Well, Vern's is not part of the corridor, but the parking lot and the skate park are, and the Middleton site, if it's not going to be used as part of the development, could stay the way it is.
Okay.
We also have the single family lot that
Yes.
is in the environmental corridor that's already has a home on it. That should be removed from the environmental corridor as well, I would think.
I would agree, but I think the homeowner should have an opportunity to
True.
weigh in on that.
You have two more on Hillcrest as well.
Mhm.
I would just note that the environmental corridor is not noticed on the agenda for any of these lots. So,
That's what I was
yeah,
thinking.
it's good feedback, but I would advise that we have a separate discussion as a separate agenda item for removal of the environmental corridor.
Sure, that's fine. If that could be on the next agenda when we talk about this, that would be great.
Can I have some advice from staff when we're working on, because of this alternate proposal? What is a motion that would be reasonable? Because I want to make sure I'm not, because when we're talking about these parcels, I want to make sure I'm not utilizing the old space, we're using the new space.
Hey, may I try to answer that? I think the motion that the recommendation from the staff in the memo, which is showing on the screen. I would wonder, do we want to make it also not just contingent upon the council's approval of the flu map amendment, but contingent upon or specifically applying to the alternative concept? And I do think we would need, well, maybe we don't have to do it now. Yeah, do you see where I'm going?
Yeah, I
That-
understand.
Because if we're saying we recommend that council approve the zoning using this new concept, we have a parcel of land. I mean, we're always like, oh, well, it's contingent upon council doing something else first. But we have a parcel of land that is zoned conservancy. That's a skate park and a parking lot. And we're talking about turning the parking lot into something else without us having changed the flu map. So staff, what would you do?
So I think, first of all, I want to confirm that this is, I misspoke earlier, this is definitely in the flu map does show this as conservancy. I double checked the hard copy outside my office. I have not worked on this project like Daphne and Abby, so I just was a little surprised to hear that. But it definitely needs to be part of the motion to make that a contingency of approval. I think you could also add to that requesting that staff develop a proposal for adjusting the environmental corridor in this boundary in this area, and then we can have that as a future discussion at the next meeting. That might be the best way to handle it. So basically, you're giving us direction to develop a proposal to adjust the environmental corridor for discussion at the next meeting. That would, I think, be the best way to handle that.
And then we also have to have the CDA approve it as well.
Yeah, and I think those are separate motion. Yeah,
Part of the motion.
yeah, it's the second motion.
There-
Unless you want to put that all together.
I'm okay with it. Yes.
I just had a
Commissioner.
question regarding the rezoning the property at 7617 Terrace right now. As I mentioned at the last Plan Commission meeting, I wanted to follow what I thought were the appropriate processes, which is to amend the flu map, then take a look at the rezoning. But right now, the flu map is still contingent upon council approval. I had hoped the council would have taken that matter up. Does it matter to the applicant if the 7617 isn't rezoned now, but is addressed at a subsequent meeting? There seems like there's quite a bit that has to happen.
On the one hand, I don't think it matters. I think we prefer to have it all go through council at the same time as one package. On the other hand, I do think that's kind of a separate issue. If the skate park didn't happen, or I'm sorry, if the parking lot didn't happen or Middleton didn't happen, we would still seek to combine it with Vern's and would still want assurances that we can do that. And we now own that house. So, I guess it could go either way. I think by passing that today, it gives us some assurances that, we're not working in vain on this site. It would still have to go to council with obviously the other parts of this package. And I would, if I were staff, I would say pass it here, but let's go to council with the whole thing at once. So we're not going to council more than once. If that's, but I think what it says to us today is, we recognize you own this house, you own Vern's, that a project here makes sense. And either way,
Right.
Randy.
Okay. So is there,
Maybe the first motion would be to do this in the opposite order, and that is to embrace the concept and refer that to the CDA. And that sets in motion all the other, the wheels of that need to be set in motion. I would note, and I think one of the commissioners last time pointed it out, we do have in our zoning ordinance the environmental corridor process for how that's adjusted. And so that's why I was thinking that rather than taking that up tonight, that you give us the guidance as part of consideration of this new concept of incorporating the parking lot into the concept and excluding the Middleton parcel. That as part of that, we would put together that package for the environmental corridor adjustment. It may well be, I would argue that should be a pretty limited process just because the existing parking lot is what it is. I mean, it's not an environmental corridor. So maybe that's the way to handle this.
all right, so is there a motion to refer the project to the CDA?
I'll attempt one. Okay. I move that the Plan Commission forward the alternative concept for PC 2644 to the CDA with our endorsement contingent upon appropriate changes to the zoning, flu map, and environmental corridor for the parcels involved. That's my best shot. Sorry.
Is there a second?
Summers will second.
Did you capture all that?
Yeah, and I think we could say for the three parcels, the address 7617 Terrace, what was the other one? 7621.
Well, I don't
Actually,
want
I
to
just realized it's
mention,
not on the agenda, is it? The
I
parking
don't-
lot.
I don't want to mention Midtune.
No, I was intentionally not mentioning Middleton. How
Well,
was the
that's why I
agenda?
left it vague.
Can you just walk over and maybe take a look, see, because sometimes
Look at
The
what he wrote.
Midtoon
or-
site does not actually have an address, so you
Right.
can't even
Okay.
accidentally reference it, even if you wanted to.
that makes me feel
Well,
better.
I deliberately made it vague to not refer to, because do we have an address for the parking lot too?
I'm just looking up at the address there.
Did you just say parking lot on?
But I didn't mention like the specific
CD
changes
parking
to flu map or zoning.
So I think the skateboard park and the parking lot share one parcel. Is that ring a bell to you? Okay. So we don't have that address listed on the agenda. So I think embracing the concept.
Mhm.
How did- let
The
me go back to my-
alternative
Yeah.
concept.
To forward the alternative concept to the CDA with our endorsement contingent on appropriate changes to the zoning and future land use map
And
for the two, and the environmental corridor
environmental
for
corridor.
the two parcels. And then we know that that concept also includes the parking lot. So I think,
Well, that's why I didn't say, I
I
didn't
know.
list a number. I
You
just said
didn't,
for
I
the
know.
parcels involved.
all right, fine.
All right,
I mean, because I wanted to be clear, we're talking about the concept, the alternative concept.
This isn't taking final action on anyone's
Right.
property, and it's also the city's property. So
Yeah.
I'm not as concerned about it.
Right.
So I think it's the important point is you're endorsing the concept. There seems to be broader support or certainly less opposition.
And
So,
yeah.
okay.
okay. So any comments? Hearing none, all those in favor of I'm sorry, what's the verbiage? Is it approving or
To
forwarding?
forward the alternative
Forward.
concept to the CDA with our endorsement contingent, with the plan commission's endorsement contingent on appropriate changes to the zoning, future land use map and environmental corridor for the parcels involved.
Excellent. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Is there anything else staff needs on this topic?
Do you want us to go to the rezoning of 7617?
That is the request.
That's on the agenda.
Right.
Commissioner Bruce, you okay with the?
Yeah.
Okay. Would you like to make the motion?
No.
Okay. Yes. I guess I will move that we approve the rezoning of the property at 7617. Nope, sorry.
Yes.
Yes,
you're
that
correct.
is at 7617 Terrace Avenue, the Mariner site to downtown mixed use, contingent on the approval by council of the flu map amendment.
Is there a second?
I'll second that motion.
Any comments? Hearing
Contingent.
none, all those in favor of changing the zoning at 7617 to MUD? Please say aye.
May I ask a question? Sorry, Commissioner Harp. So I did not reference the alternative concept, which,
That's fine. At first these motions overlap a little bit, but this is fine.
okay,
Thank you,
sorry.
Commissioner Hart, for saying yes. Any other ayes?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Any opposed? Rezoning motion passes unanimously. Do we have to do any other parcels? Are we done here?
For now.
That's what I thought. I just want to make sure because of that alternative proposal,
No.
make sure we're not.
I wanted to thank the applicant for, working with staff to try to work on solutions. And I think you're on the right track. So great. Yeah.
I will add a note in the minutes, which was stated at the meeting, to indicate that this does not include the Middleton parcel.
Yep.
Okay. Moving on to the housing presentation by planning staff and Encore Homes. I believe there's also, I was going to say the other, there's also the Bishop's Bay developers here as well. I'm going to ask the developers that are here to come to the front. And if you have two folks, go ahead and, I know Chad is still on with us here. If his person is still in, we can come up here. Oh, he left, thank you. And I think Bell
thought Bell
Farms was also gonna come.
She is traveling right now, so is
okay.
unable to make it, but she sent us a slide, and it's included in here.
Thank you. Okay, very good. So we're gonna go ahead and talk about housing. Staff, if you would like to start.
Sure. So I'm just going to give a quick overview of housing data in Middleton and around Dane County. For Commissioner Bruce and Alder Hanairo, a lot of this will be familiar to you since we've gone over in workforce housing. And then we have
You guys can teach.
yeah, so if you have anything to add, feel free. And then we do have a slide from the developer of Bell Farm. And then we'll have Chad Woodman, who's on Zoom, will give a presentation, and then Terrence and Jake are here. And you know, we contacted them late last week, but they're still here, and so
Thank
we're
you
really
for
glad
joining
to
us.
have them here. Yep. And then afterwards, Mayor Kuhn will give an update on the housing survey that she's conducting. So first, one of the large segments of housing is employment. And so in Middleton, we have over 16,000 people who work in Middleton and live elsewhere. So these are, you know, people coming into Middleton. And this is data from 2021. So it does incorporate a lot of that work from home data already. And so we already have a huge, you know, group of people coming into Middleton. We're a net importer of jobs. And then on top of that, there's 6,500 so people who live in Middleton and work elsewhere. And so because of that, there's always just going to be, I guess, higher pressure on our housing in Middleton, just because most people want to live near where they work. And so there's probably a large portion of this 16,000 that, you know, would move to Middleton if they could. And so, and then on top of that, you know, I think most of us know that Middleton's a great place to live. So there's a lot of people who will live in Middleton and work elsewhere. And so there's always just going to be that kind of pressure on housing in Middleton because of one part of it is because of the employment and all the jobs we have here. This is something that you've all seen probably several times already, but it's formatted a little differently. That dark bluish green color shows household growth in Middleton over the years. That light green, yellow green shows the number of units that we've permitted, actually, you know, with a building permit each year as well. And so you can see that except for 2020, when we all know what happened in 2020, you know, our household growth has increased faster than the number of units we've produced. And then there's this tiny sliver at the bottom that shows our single family development. And this chart down here kind of shows the actual numbers. Most of these, the single family homes that we've seen are in the community of Bishop's Bay. Those were where we saw all those single family homes being developed. And so even if, you know, pre-2018, from when this chart starts, if, you know, our households and our units were equal, you can see since then, at least in the last 5 years, Middleton has grown significantly faster than the number of units that we have produced. This chart on the right, I like to have this in here, but Abby doesn't like me showing it, but it's from our 2019 comprehensive plan. So this data was compiled by the Department of Administration in 2019. And so you can see this, the second to last number, it's kind of small for everyone in the audience, but that says 24,865. And that was the projection they had for Middleton by 2035. The DOA comes out with population each year. And so for 2023, they said that we were at 23,476. So we'll likely hit that 24,000 this year or next year. And so that just means we're 10 years ahead of schedule from what the DOA had projected. And this was just back in 2019. And so we're growing a lot faster than anticipated. And so Dane County, they also, they also project that it'll grow. Dane County as a whole will grow by around 200,000 people. Middleton is about 4% of that currently. And so if we grow, proportionally to Dane County, we're likely going to see around 8,000 people coming in by 2050. So there's a lot of growth anticipated in Middleton and in Dane County in general. This was prepared by Dane County again. They're right now preparing their regional housing strategy. And so this was a lot of data that they had prepared in anticipation of that. One thing we talk about a lot is missing middle housing. And so this one chart here shows Middleton is actually very diverse. We're one of the most diverse municipalities in the county. And so we have a lot more, 2 to 19 units and then 20 plus units. Something that we could work on right now is the single family attached. And so those are like duplexes, townhouses, those kind of condo units. That's kind of what I think a lot of our discussions have been saying is missing in Middleton as well. And then finally, this is kind of a sad graphic I like to show a lot, but basically it shows the median home value. So this is home ownership in Middleton compared to all the other municipalities in Dane County. And so Middleton is right here, right after Shorewood Hills and Maple Bluff, which I personally don't consider those two other neighborhoods as, normal neighborhoods, normal communities. And so, if we got rid of those, Middleton is basically one of the most expensive jurisdictions to live in, or, for home value wise, it's definitely one of the highest. And then, as I said, because of employment, our historic housing production, and then also because of Middleton Cross Plains School District, we have, a lot of people who want to move to Middleton, which drives housing prices up. However, we have heard from the school district that they are experiencing really lower than average enrollment numbers. And that's just because families with children are finding it really difficult to find homes in Middleton and move to Middleton, even though we have such a great school district. And so then, as we said, these are kind of projected single family. We've invited the 3 developers of these communities to speak on, their future anticipation. So Community of Bishops Bay, the back 9 neighborhood, I think is basically all built out almost. I counted, maybe 5 lots, maybe less than that, that could be, built on and might be built on this year or next year. Bell Farm, they just had their SIP approved, I think, last year or so by Plan Commission. And so that's what I'm showing in the approved this year. And then the 2 to 5 is, their overall plan of how many single family and townhomes they have. And then the same again for Red Tail Ridge. And so they already have, 39 single family and 30 townhomes approved with this SIP. And as you just saw, they're looking to increase that more. And so the rest of the GIP I put in the 2 to 5 years. So overall in the 1 to 5 years, we're looking at 425 single family homes to be built, and then 116 townhomes. So hopefully that graph that I showed earlier will show a lot more green and red, to balance out the household growth.
I think I'll pause you here. Let's, well, because I love looking at numbers. I'll be honest, it's my favorite. Sorry, bad math, nerd joke. So the projected single family for Bishop's Bay this year is 5 lots. Bell Farm is 36 for single family homes, and just skipping townhomes for now. And Red Tail Ridge is 39. So we're looking at 80, 80 homes this year. That's a dramatic improvement over the last 5 years. Looks like it was averaging about 12 homes a year, if that. I'm going to ask the Community of Bishops Bay developer to talk. If you could share for a good 2 or 3 minutes things that you like about building in Middleton, things that are challenging, and ways we can improve. And I'm sorry that you have to go first. So please share. You're on the screen.
And you'll have to have a microphone.
All right, can you hear me all right? It's all right.
Yep.
I'm Terrence Wall. This is Jake with the community of Bishops Bay. So just as background, Daphne talked about 16,000 people that could live here because they're working here. The community of Bishops Bay could hold a total population when it's done of 6,000 people. We're approved for 1,350 home sites, 1,650 multifamily sites, multifamily units, and a 300,000 square foot town center. We could increase the number of both multifamily and single family. We certainly have the land for it. And we have over 50% of our land is open space. The need for housing is significant. There's a chart, I don't know which one it is, but to give you an idea of house lot pricing, resales only, just resales.
I'm gonna come see it while you're talking.
Yeah, so resales, the home prices are up between 10%, 30%, and 70%, depending on the price point. So the lower price points up are about 10%, the middle's up about 30, and the higher price points up about 70%. These are only resales in the back nine neighborhood of Bishops Bay. Our average resale price there is over $1 million, which, you know, if you had asked me that 7 years ago, I would never have guessed that. So prices have shot up because, frankly, there's a very restricted supply of housing in Middleton. The community of Bishops Bay does comprise, I've estimated, so don't quote me, I know Mark, on if I'm wrong on the exact number, but I'm estimating that the community of Bishops Bay controls 95% of the future growth land of Middleton, unless you do some kind of annexation or something. So the majority of growth would occur at Bishops Bay. There's a large housing shortage. There's a huge demand for housing. We have the ability to create more supply and potentially lower prices, but there's a big roadblock. For example, I just want to point out, we still have about over 400 house lots, single-family house lots we could build on the Middleton side of Bishops Bay. So keep in mind that we are in two jurisdictions. We have the Westport side and the Middleton side.
Okay.
So we have about more than 400 units of housing that's single family that we could build on the Middleton side. But we're at the peak of the hill. So once you go down the other side, you have a whole host of infrastructure needs that are unique. That is to say, you can't do gravity-fed sewer anymore. You got to do a main all the way down. You got to do a lift station. You got to do a reverse force main all the way back up. The engineering department wants us to build a 2-mile long water line coming all the way from Red Tail to our development when we already have 3 different connections to sewer to water lines. The cost for the regional infrastructure would be $14 million. Now, in a city, normally the regional infrastructure, give you an example, Madison, the regional infrastructure is paid for by the city. That is to say, this is infrastructure that's off-site, that is used by a greater area, more properties, et cetera. Madison will do a neighborhood plan. They'll plan out this whole, like the West Side neighborhood, they just did this. They'll plan it all out. Then they turn it over to their engineering department. The engineering department goes in, they build the regional arterial road, they'll build the regional water line, the regional sewer lines, the water tower, the regional stormwater system. And then when that's all done, they announce, okay, this area is open up for development. Then the developers come in and they develop the parcels that they own and the infrastructure within those parcels. Middleton doesn't do that. Middleton doesn't have any kind of infrastructure plan or anything in place to plan for the future growth of the city. There's no thoughts by the engineering department to do anything in terms of regional infrastructure. In fact, the opposite is true. I'm just being blunt with you. The roadblock we're having is that the city engineer expects us to pay for all the regional infrastructure, but we can't do that. If you're only building a phase of about 40 units or 40 lots per year, you can't support $14 million of upfront infrastructure plus the cost of the on-site infrastructure, which is our own detention pond, our own roads, et cetera. So that's impossible to finance and impossible to even pay for when we can only do about 40 lots per year. So my suggestions, if you want to increase housing or availability, and by the way, as a sidebar, Wanakee as a village has been very good at managing the number of lots that they have available each year. They literally have a target, and I think it's about 100 lots per year, but don't quote me on that. But they have a very specific number they want to see every year, that number available in single-family lots. It's a number that they feel is enough to provide the market with stability on pricing. It's not too much, but it's not too little. And they kind of hit the sweet spot. And they've been very good at managing that throughout the last 20 years to provide enough lots in the village for consistent, reasonable, regular growth. Middleton doesn't do that. Middleton's kind of ad hoc. If a developer wants to come in, they come in. If they don't, they don't. There's no proactive approach on the infrastructure needs of the city. If an additional water line is needed that's 2 miles long, the city should either build that or build another water tower. The engineering department is telling us, you should build the water line. And I said, well, you know, if we have to have another water line, we aren't going to build only what we need. And the engineering department said, okay, you only build what you need. Well, that doesn't make sense. If I'm the city, you want a water line that's big enough to satisfy all the future growth of the city, the annexations, and the growth of other future housing subdivisions, so you can attach to that water line. You don't want us building a 2 mile long water line that's only for Bishop's Bay that nobody else can attach to. That's crazy. You don't want a lift station that we build only for Bishop's Bay. It should be built to handle everybody in that valley, you know, in terms of being able to connect to that lift station. So you have one lift station.
Can I clarify, because you talked before about Red Tail Ridge, are they affected by that same 2 mile water line?
Well, we would be connecting to the water line in that area if we did this idea. You can ask Chad. I know he has regional costs that are being imposed on him also that are making pricing very difficult. So remember, anytime we have higher costs, we just have to raise the prices. So we are looking at, you know, in Westport, we're looking at potentially building a water tower that we could then have a connection to the Middleton side with a valve as a backup water supply. We are meeting the DNR required water pressure. We have 3 connections of water, and legally we don't need this, but we're being told we can't continue development. So development on the Middleton side of Bishop's Bay has been on hold for, you know, 3 or 4 years. That's why you saw your permit numbers drop, because we filled up and we're done. We're focusing on Westport because they'll finance the infrastructure. Now this problem can be solved as the way it should be, is either use a utility district like the Madison Water Utility builds the water lines for the regional issues. They then put that in, they bond it, and then they put it in their water rates. The sewer, same thing. They put it in their sewer district utility, they build it, and then you connect and you pay your connection fees, but you also pay your water bill, right? And that covers some of the cost of the bonds that pays for the regional infrastructure.
Sorry to interrupt. Can I ask a question for clarification?
Sure.
So the town of Westport, they're building the water tower on that side?
No, so
Oh.
they're financing the infrastructure within the phase 7, phase 6 and phase 7. We're already done with 6 and we're going into 7. We're talking to them about, you know, hey, instead of doing a 2 mile long water line, it would actually be far less expensive if we built a water tower in Westport and went backwards. We connect to city of Middleton with a valve. So if something happened to the water line coming down Highway Q, the valve could be open and water flows the other way to have an emergency backup supply of water. So we're just talking about that idea right now. Nothing's been approved or anything like that. As a way of sort of coming at the back door of solving that question, although legally, again, we don't need that. We just are being told we have to do it.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
Did you agree to that?
Agree to what?
The agreement?
I'm just letting you know what.
Did you agree to it though? When you got Bishop's Bay approved, did you agree to that?
When we first approved Bishop's Bay and the master plan GAP, we were never told that that would be required. That was not a requirement. That came later in future years. I don't
Did you
remember which
agree to
year.
it?
So I don't recall.
If we could go back to,
But anyways,
my question, and
This
maybe,
isn't a court. This is,
no,
I'm
no,
just
no,
telling
and
you what the
maybe I'm
costs
not,
are.
maybe I'm not understanding, or maybe I'm not asking the question right, but I'm trying to understand. So the town of Westport is not building the water tower.
Nothing's been discussed on that.
Okay.
It's only that,
Because it sounds like you're being critical of Middleton, and that's, you're right, for not building a water tower. And yet neither is the town of Westport. So what are they doing that's making that?
thank you.
Thanks.
Good question. We don't need the water tower. We meet the state requirement under the DNR for water pressure and water flow. The water tower would only be a backdoor way of building that in Westport. We don't need it in Westport. It is only to satisfy not having to build a 2-mile long water line in Middleton by having another connection as a backup supply of water. So it's purely a Middleton demand. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, PSI. So you look at flow, you look at pressure, et cetera, but we meet the requirements for DNR. Yeah. Okay. So concluding, anyways, I don't mean to be critical. You asked about how can we increase housing? How can we keep costs down?
Yeah.
Other cities have methods of doing this through water utilities, sewer utilities, special assessment district. We could do that. We could do TIF, whatever you choose, whatever you feel is best. That's up to you. But the regional infrastructure's got to be built somehow, and it's got to be done proactively. And then you'll see more housing, developers will come, more housing will be built, and this issue will be solved. Otherwise, your pricing is going to continue to skyrocket. We've seen lot pricing skyrocket at Bishop's Bay, not because we want to, but our costs have skyrocketed. The cost of building a road is enormous today, and we have to put up a letter of credit. I want to highlight one thing. If you can picture a $10 million infrastructure, let's say, you might get 35 lots out of that. In order to build $10 million, we have to go to the bank and get a letter of credit of $12.5 million. So we have to pay for the infrastructure of 10 million. We have to put up a letter of credit for 12.5. So now we're at $22.5 million of credit I need at the bank and collateral at the bank. Except when banking and getting a loan, you have a 50% loan to value. So 22.5 million now becomes 45 million. So I personally have to put up $45 million of collateral and have $45 million of credit for me to build a simple 35 lots of $10 million of cost. So I think it's got $45 million of credit at a bank. So you got to think about that. How many developers can do that? Maybe 5 in the whole state. That's part of the problem. And then you add on, if the regional costs are added on, you divide those by the number of lots, it just, you would lose your shirt. The cost would far exceed the price of the lot. We started off in phase 1 selling lots for $80,000, $125,000. We were losing money on the $80,000 lots. Today, we have to, our costs in Middleton, if we build a lot, it's going to cost us over $220,000. The cost, not the price. And we still have to accommodate, paying a realtor. We got, interest and carrying costs. It takes about 2 to 3 years to sell out a phase. So just the costs have skyrocketed. Everything's gone up. So I think the way I sum this up is, let's get to yes. And get to yes means how can city address regional infrastructure costs, finance, like Westport's doing, finance some of this infrastructure costs so we can reduce the prices. It can be done through a special assessment district or utility or TIF. And then prices can be brought down. And lastly, you want all kinds of housing. There's basically 3 types of house lots. There's the narrow, small lots, high density like Viridian does. That's kind of starter home. There's the middle income lots. Those are about 100 foot by 100 foot. So you get about, not 4, you get about 2.5 per acre because you have other open space requirements. And then there's the larger lots, bigger, higher priced. And you want to make sure you have all of that. You want to have all price points because people who are in a current lot that's a middle income home, they may be at an age or older and they can afford to move up. And so they'll vacate their house and that house will be sold to a younger family. So you want to have all these price points covered through the city, cover the infrastructure, finance that somehow, and then you're going to have a winning strategy to bring prices down and have enough supply. Thank you.
That perspective and those insights. I do want to switch to Chad I believe he's on vacay because he's at a cabin. So Chad, if you are, thanks for joining us.
No problem.
I'm gonna let you add on to what Terrence was talking about, and I'm gonna ask the city, can you guys help me understand, is Chad's development, is it on the same, like, do they bump up to Bishop's Bay, or is there some space in between
The
it?
Conservancy and a legacy farm are in between.
Okay,
So it's probably a half mile or mile? Well, Pheasant Branch Road is probably a mile west of Q, I would guess. I can measure it.
the reason I don't go too crazy. The reason I'm asking is because we're talking about these water mains and infrastructures, and I'm just wondering if they're border developments. So I think you're showing us a map.
Yeah, so Red Tail Ridge ends at Pheasant Branch, and then Community of Bishop's Bay starts at
That is
Highway Q.
yonder.
So there
Yeah.
is a bit of space in
And then
between.
that's North Lake, isn't it?
Yes, right here. Yep.
Could just point out that in the middle is the Dane County Conservancy extension.
Right.
So everything has to go north, then east, then south. So you have to go all the way around that.
Yeah.
I'm glad you're pointing that part out. It's something I forgot about, because you're right, that's county land.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that. Chad, please tell us your insights on what's working well with Middleton. What's a challenge? I know you brought up tonight those two homes and the cost of, I think you said $500,000 to have that road go through. It is something that we are trying to be flexible with and hope that you and staff can work together. But if we keep hitting things like this, it probably is frustrating. So the reason I'm saying that out loud is that if developers come in and they're trying to hit those 100 houses, I think it's great that we have 3 different developers working right now on housing. I'm sure there's a couple other that are doing smaller infill. But if we keep hitting a lot of the same issues, or the developers are all hitting the same, maybe it's something we can collectively work on to try to reduce barriers, would be the hope. So Chad?
Right. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this PowerPoint since Terrence has already covered a lot of points, and I think we all know that there's a shortage of new single-family homes in Middleton. I don't think that's a surprise to anybody. And you had asked specifically about the condo market, so I'll get into that a little bit. To start out with, I think that I'm going to pat myself on the back and say, so far, Red Tail Ridge is a success, and I think we're doing a great job of providing that missing middle housing that we strive to do, and that's been our goal for a long time. And I think that you can tell if you've driven by there, there's a lot of product going up. There's most or half of which is already sold. The demand is very high. So far, I think working with the city and ourselves, we are on a good path. I don't think there's any question about that. And I believe and I hope that you guys are happy with the product that you're seeing out there. There is, we did talk about some things earlier in the Plan Commission. What I don't think sometimes Plan Commissions understand or city staff understands is the death by 1,000 cuts. Let's call it that. In today's example, it doesn't seem like a big deal. It doesn't look like much, but at the end of the day, it is a big deal, especially when you're trying to provide some attainable housing. Our first product out there is the townhome product that I believe that you asked about before. And we started at like $395. And to me, pulling off a $395 product in the city of Middleton is really quite an accomplishment. And so what I hope in general, so please take all my comments with this, frame or attitude. I feel like the city is a partner, and I think that the city needs what we're doing, and therefore I want to work with you and not always be just directed by staff to do this, that, or the other thing. I want you to understand the ramifications of it. I want to just make sure we're all on the same page so that we understand that a lot of little comments, all of which may be perfectly valid, at the end of the day, they add expense to a product that we're trying to deliver for, let's even call it first-time home buyers, which I believe is really now at the $395 range, which is hard for me to stomach, but I'm old, so it just doesn't seem right to me, but that's the way it is now. So the little things that would go a long ways are quicker plan approvals. I don't feel like the city is currently staffed to meet the demand of what's required to build the number of houses that the city needs. And I think there's reason for that. I think it's been a long time since you've had a residential development in the city. I think that it's been, and you're a little out of practice, and that's not a complaint. That's just stating the facts. I think that there's a lot of other stuff going on, and sometimes I feel like I don't know how things are prioritized, but sometimes it feels like, and I'm sure everybody feels this way, that I'm the last one. And I only bring that up because in today's day and age, even time adds cost to everything. And especially in Wisconsin, where the construction season for roads and so on is only between March and November, basically, delays can literally delay a project by a year. And the interest on the delayed project by a year can be an absolute killer. I do want to eventually explore some regional infrastructure ideas that I have. And I'm not going to get into too many details tonight, but I'd like to set up a meeting sometime to talk to some people and work forward on that.
I'm sorry, can you repeat that part?
I said I do have some ideas about the regional infrastructure that we're required to put in for Redtail. And just to explain that further, so we have to go to the Pheasant Branch water line, which is off of our site. We have to go under a creek, and then we got to run in 12-inch sewer line through our neighborhood so that eventually Terrence could hook up to that someday. Does that make sense? But the impact on my neighborhood is $1.6 million, which has to be borne by the people in that particular neighborhood. So sometimes I feel like it's unfortunate that the people that don't live there don't get a say in how things work. Does that make sense?
Yes, I'm following.
So it's kind of a tax to the people that don't live there yet. Anyway, I don't want to get, Terrence already covered that to the nth degree, so I don't want to get in too far into that.
Jack, can I
yes.
ask you if, because Terrence was talking on a lot of things about regional infrastructure, and I know you started off by saying, since he's covered it, I'm going to move forward, but can I clarify, do you agree with what Terrence said, or agree mostly with what he's, like, was what he was saying, feeling the same for you?
Yes, I do agree. And I have done a lot of work on the west side of Madison. And I don't mean to compare two cities because I don't think that's fair, but it is very different. And, if the city were to put in the infrastructure and we were charged to hook up to it later on, that would still be more cost effective. And it would be on a per house basis as opposed to split up amongst the limited number of houses that are in a particular development. So you could prorate it across, I don't know, thousands of houses basically, and have a hookup fee like we did for our sewer line. We hooked up to the Pheasant Branch interceptor and we paid a hookup fee. Makes sense. If I put the infrastructure in, I might be able to try to get a recapture fee for it, but I'll never see the money because they only last for 10 years. And I don't think the farmer to my north is ever going to sell, and I'll never recapture any of the money that went to the public use basically. If I can, I'll move on. You'd asked a question about condos and why you don't see more condos in Middleton. And from our perspective, the basic reason is that secondary financing markets will not finance condos that are not at least 50% sold. So that means Fannie and Freddie, you've probably heard of those folks. They will not finance those types of projects. So if you wanted to go get a 30-year fixed rate mortgage on a condo that's new, you can't do it. You can get an ARM or you can pay cash. But most folks want the security of a 30-year mortgage. So that's why we've developed these new products, which are single family condos that the secondary market will finance at 30-year fixed rates. And also our townhomes are unique in that they're zero lot line townhomes that will also, they're not condos technically, they have a shared maintenance agreement, so people can get 30-year fixed financing for those as well. And we've been working with Jim, Inspector, and MG&E to figure out how to pull off this separation legally on everybody's side, and we've all come together and we've got it figured out now. But we could also do it under the UDC code or single family code, which means that a lot of commercial requirements that make residential housing far more expensive don't apply to these homes. So we were able to save some dollars for the end user in that regard. Again, a very popular product. They're selling at a nice clip, and we're happy to bring them to Middleton.
Well, thank you for that. I appreciate that, those insights. It is something we've been talking about on the council side. I'm sure that the workforce housing members are aware, and our other plan commissioners. And I just have to tell you that Terrence's dog was so excited when you talked about saving money. It jumped up on the lap. So I think that's a good place. Is there any clarifying questions for Chad or for Terrence at this time from the commissioners?
I had a question for Terrence. Is the lot count and the densities at Bishop's Bay fixed at this point in time?
We have
Maybe pull the microphone just in case.
Yes, I mean, we have a fixed count, but we have room if we want to change things. We do have in our GDP and master plan approval, we have an agreement in there that says we can change things if approved by the council. So we could add more, we could change the sizes, whatever. It's only a master plan right now.
I was just wondering if another way to try to bring pricing down would be to go with some smaller lot sizes, increase the number of lots and go with smaller lot sizes and maybe attack it that way as well.
So I know that's intuitively, that sounds good. But we did not make any money on the first 5 phases. So the smaller lots and even the medium lots, we lost money. One reason is because we have to do things like build a $300,000 water meter station in Middleton, when if you're in Madison, it would have cost $50,000 because of the requirements being placed on it. So we found that we can't profitably make smaller lots. It's very difficult. I think the best party to do that is a builder developer where, like Chad, where he's building the house and the lot, Viridian is doing the lot and the house. They're not selling the lot. I don't think a developer can make money. If you can't make money, you can't get a loan.
It's interesting, what you're pointing out, and I know we have that other developer with a slide, so, we can see what thing they're offering as well.
I had one question for the 2 developers who are here. So the changes to Middleton zoning ordinance, do you think that will streamline the process, the approval process, and therefore could that, I don't want to say drive costs down because costs are going to continue to go up, but could that help?
It's a great question.
Chad, can you go first?
So I am very pleased to see Middleton update a new zoning code, and there's a lot of communities around that have not done that yet, and that is definitely something that should help eliminate some roadblocks down the road. The zoning code, unfortunately, is only one part of the equation, because then you get into other rules, subdivision ordinances, and the things that we talked about before that still add layers of difficulty. But I want to emphasize that I'm very happy to see Middleton adopt the zoning code. It's long overdue, and it needs to be done in a lot more communities. The type of product that we're building now just doesn't fit the old mold, so the new one is much better.
Great.
I think it's on.
Thanks, Chad.
There we go. Yeah, and I would just add to that as well. I think the zoning change will help significantly. But like Chad said, there's just so many more factors to this. And one of those that seems to be taking a while for, in my personal experience, is engineering review and the engineering comments. Like we ran into with Red Tail earlier in the agenda tonight, there's just a lot of little things that are very stringent, and you have to work through that, eat into the profits, drive lot prices up, and just take time to resolve. So I think that's a big part of it. But yeah, the zoning change does help.
Great, thanks.
One idea we talked about is I think engineering is overwhelmed with all the new projects, and not just housing, but everything going on in the city. And, you know, the position of city engineer and director of public works, correct me if I'm wrong, Mark, but that used to be two positions, right? Way, way, way back when, many, many, many years ago. It was combined, I believe, with Sean's, you know, when Sean came along. And to me, I think you should split it up again. And, you know, Sean can stay as director of public works and then bring in a new city engineer. And you could fund that with impact fees. I'm not usually an advocate for for fees, but a small impact fee on each multifamily lot, on each multifamily unit, and on each single family unit would completely pay for that. And we then, the developers, would save a lot of money on time. And time right now is costing us, 8.5%. That's my latest loan that I got was 8.5% interest. Yeah.
Very large.
So it's very expensive time. And if you could reduce that and also reduce the amount of surprises. So in Madison, you have, and I'm not criticizing, I'm just giving you, Chad's more eloquent than I am. I have no filter. I just give it to you straight up. Madison has very specific processes. You go through that, it's like a checklist, and then boom, you're approved, right? You know exactly what you got to give, the time frame, and boom, you're done. Middleton is none of that. It's just very out in the open. It's whatever, engineering department wants to put on you. You have no idea. We surveyed builders because we were having trouble getting home builders to Bishop's Bay. And I'm not joking, half the builders that we surveyed in Dade County said they will not build in Middleton because of what they call the surprises, death by 1,000 cuts, all these demands on them to build housing that adds costs that they don't incur in other cities. And if we could just make a more, predictable, like a more predictable process with a checklist, here's what you got to do. The zoning code, that's a good start. Then we could reduce costs if we could get separate city engineers focused solely on the private sector plans. That would streamline. I'm the one who suggested that Middleton hire a state review building permit officer and charge for that. And you did that, you're making money at that. And developers love it. We would have had to wait 6 months at the state to get a permit. We can come here and get it in 2 to 3 weeks. It's fantastic. And it's very clear, here's what you got to do. Boom, boom, we're done, we get the permit. But before that, when you're trying to get through the plan review, there's a lot of surprises, as Jake says, added on to add costs. Just like, change one thing and all of a sudden it's $500,000 for Chad.
Yeah, that's hard, especially when we're trying to add housing and keep things affordable. It's what the public keeps asking us. There will always be also nice homes. I'm not saying everything has to be affordable, but we can try and do better. So I do appreciate that. I think I'm going to pass it back to Daphne. I know you have your slides.
Yes, so I believe, this is the last slide. And so this was the comments from Kathleen, who's developing Bell Farm. She, I think, has a lot of the same, comments as Terrence and Chad. She had a one-page write-up that I kind of summarized into a SWOT analysis for this, since her comments kind of fit into these perfectly. But her biggest takeaway also was the delays in the city entitlement process, which caused delays in, the overall timeline of her project. And so that, on top of the high interest rates, which were mentioned before as well, just kind of increased her holding costs. And, those kinds of delays have kind of threatened the project, much more than I'm sure she would have liked. And so that was her general comments. She also provided her, estimated, the estimated units that would come online each year. And then this is also a picture of one of her advertised homes.
Thank you for that.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so from my recall, Bell Farm's going to have some smaller lots. I think we saw something like 6,000 square feet for the land, but more like 1,500 square feet for the house was one of the things.
Yeah, Bell
Still
Farm.
pricey.
Yes.
So it wasn't-
And Bell Farm has, I think, a lot more diverse. They have like shotgun homes, nest homes. This is what's showing is like a Chicago row house. So they have a lot more variety, all kind of in that single family, or, slightly detached, kind of like what Chad is doing with the townhomes. So a lot more diverse kind of housing there.
Any comments?
Thank you for putting this together, Daphne, and thank you to the developers for coming and sharing your feedback.
Thank you.
Do you want to give them the copies?
So
Give them copies.
Oh,
thanks. I was going to talk about my survey results.
Oh, yes.
these are just boards. You guys have them.
Oh, I appreciate that
so
because
much.
I can't see. I don't have even good readers for that. Thanks. Nice to see you.
Thanks.
Thanks for your evening.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Jake.
Appreciate it.
Yeah.
Have a good one.
Yep.
You too.
Okay, so this was a survey of TIF apartment developers over the last decade from 2013 to 23. Staff worked with me to implement the survey and go ahead. So this is a standard slide that the staff uses, and it talks about what she was saying before, what Daphne was saying before, that by the year 2050, we'll have an additional 200,000 population growth. Next slide. So the property names that we surveyed, these are apartment developers that received TIF, are there's 16 on the right side. Terrence does have a few of the developments. So he was just here. And then the rest, I think there was, I would say 10 maybe other developers, maybe a couple of them had a few of the same. 11 of the 16 developments responded. $43 million were given in TIF to these 16 developments. And over 1,500 apartments were built in these 16 developments. And those are apartment units, by the way. Let's see, 3 facilities have commercial space of the ones that responded. And of those commercial spaces are all rented. So there are some, I want to say there's 5 developments that did not respond. And I think some of them do have commercial space. So that number may not be 100%.
Well, I think the aviary.
I
Yeah.
was trying to be gentle.
No,
yes.
yeah.
I will try not to
and-
call out names. By
No,
the way.
and I would just say it's a little disappointing that developers who received TIF assistance did not fill out the survey that we requested. Maybe they don't exist anymore, but it doesn't seem like a big ask for that.
Let's think that maybe second follow-ups might be needed, but if they are to ever come in front of us, it might be a list for us to all remember. Because if they ask for future TIF and they did not respond, that might be a first good question is not yet
Yeah,
responded.
you have responded. I like that.
Perhaps they'll take
Gentle.
that thought to come and go ahead and finish the survey or resend it in. Next slide.
Sorry. Dig.
So at the recent committee of the whole, the rental vacancy rate, we're always told it's about 2 or 3%. This slide is actually from the committee of the whole. 5% is kind of the goal. At 5%, the market starts to average out. And then at 6%, that's where it's sort of the buyer's market of the rental vacancy. And I say that because maybe that's when they do free parking your first year or a free first rent, or you don't need a deposit. Like that's when that starts to come into. So vacancies by apartment size, it's actually the 1-bedroom right now that has the most vacancies. So if you start to see that, those announcements for no deposit needed or first 3 months rent, it might be on the 1-bedrooms for right now. But I thought that was interesting because it really is studios, 1-bedrooms, 2-bedrooms, and it's only the 3-bedroom that it was basically a 0. So that's good for you to know because when developers come and they say, I want to build a building of apartments and they're all going to be 1-bedrooms. And a lot of times we'll say, well, is that what the market's asking for? Well, it turns out we built a lot of 1-bedrooms here in Middleton. So maybe that's what they don't know is that's in the pipeline, or that's might change soon.
Yeah,
Next slide.
this is kind of but this is a snapshot. That 6%. We got to be careful. That's a little bit of a snapshot in time too.
It is. It'll
So-
be fluid.
And it's just for, is this just for the properties that responded to the survey?
Yes.
Yeah,
Right.
so
So-
that's
So
big too.
apartments that
right.
received TIF and
Yeah.
the ones that actually
responded?
responded.
Yeah.
Understood that could
So-
be an imperfect
Yeah.
data set.
Yeah.
But that's why I'll continue to chase down some more data. Next slide. One of the questions we ask is when people stay or they leave. When a resident chooses to stay in a development per the respondents, 82% note the reason as location, which makes sense. Middleton, people are commuting different ways. They love the Conservancy, they love the Creek corridor, they love the lake, close to shopping, restaurants. When a resident decides to leave, if it's less than 10 miles, 55% note cost and roommate issues. So imagine two people living in the same apartment and maybe the couple splits up and so then they can't afford it. Or two people move in together and they no longer get along and then they're looking for that next apartment. If it's more than 10 miles, it's 82% note the reason for a job change, which is great. And 73% note to purchase a home, which is what we are hoping. Unfortunately, if they're moving more than 10 miles, it's probably because we don't have the supply. So they're looking to actually buy, which is what a lot of people are saying. So next slide. So most of our apartments are 12 months or more out of those respondents. And happy to note that there are no Airbnb short-term rentals. That is part of the reason that I set out to do this. We had heard that one of the developments was doing Airbnb because the pandemic, they didn't fill because of the timing of their build. And so they found, or my assumption is they found that's how they could make the money to pay the bills. So with the new zoning ordinance that came about around the same time, it has to be no more than 4 months of the year, if I remember correctly, and you have to live on site. And before the survey was finished, it was leaked that we would be asking if there was Airbnb on site. And so suddenly there's no more Airbnb. And that location did not respond. However, I have found out that it's not happening there either. So that is good because we build we built apartments with TIF to build housing and apartments and not short-term hotels or long-term hotels. So next steps in the survey process, follow up with the TIF apartment developers that have not yet replied. So thank you for leading us. But we also want to do a survey with the police department, the fire department, and EMS on call volume to each location. One of the reasons is that location that was doing a large number of units, Airbnb. Coincidentally, I was on the public safety at the time, so I didn't know that that was what was going on in that development, but I knew it was a high volume police call. So one of the things I followed up with, because we're still working on addresses for all those locations before we can get the data set. But I did circle back with the chief and asked if that location still had a large number of police calls on the daily, weekly, and he said no, that it had balanced out to what is normal for an apartment unit. So that is reducing call volume for the police, because as you remember, we went to referendum for +2 police officers, and if they're being pulled for apartments, then they're stretched thin just yet again. And so reducing that Airbnb has resolved a lot of the call volume and is allowing our police officers to hopefully take their breaks, which is what you hope for. So we also want to annotate if a property manager is on site in the development. We are hearing from our emergency services that they tend to have less issues, like routine calls if there's an on-site property manager. And that's anecdotal. So that would be something we will be looking at. And then to keep looking for trend analysis. So I think that's the last slide, and we can switch to the data set.
Can I make a comment on the last slide? And a question too. So the annotation about the on-site property manager, is that something the data set will have an annotation about, or is that something that the police and fire are being asked to note?
Yeah, that's a great question. That is something I'm asking the police and fire to annotate if they know, because a lot of times they're working with them to resolve issues, so they already know if there's somebody on site, like say just during the day or 24/7.
Okay. And then my comment was just on the second bullet. So I know, I mean, to me, the number of calls for police and fire reflect the fact that there are a lot of people living in a dense area. So if you took those same people and spread them out over, say, Red Tail Ridge, you should have around the same number of calls. So I don't want anyone to have the impression that by virtue of living in an apartment, you are more likely to have issues that require police or fire intervention. I know when I lived in a condo, when my second child was born, we brought him home, burned a pizza, and the fire department came out. And that happened, not to us every week, but literally every week. The police had to come out because somebody burned something and it triggered the fire, the smoke alarm. So I just wanted to make that clear that I think about things like, what about senior apartments? I bet senior apartments get a lot of calls for,
They do.
EMS, but we don't seem to, have there isn't the same perception that that's a problem as it is if it's, apartments with people of all ages. So I just wanted to make it clear that it's just the density of people that's leading to.
And I think that's a really, I'm sorry, I think that's a really good point, and the police chief had brought that up early on for that same thing, that he could pull data not only for the new TIF developments, but say something like Spring Tree, which has been around a long time, with kind of a volume, but then also like a subdivision, like say North Lake, and
Right.
say this is, say, the number of, like, say
Calls
300
per person,
houses,
yeah.
and this is the call volume we get
Mhm.
in North Lake, in an annual year, this is the call volume you get, and likely it's the same as an apartment density for what you're saying.
Yep.
And I wouldn't say that the density is the issue. It's just the sheer number of people.
Right.
Yeah, it's the number of people.
Right. The
And
same, if you looked at a
Same-
map
Same percentage of calls per
per
person.
person,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Do we know what were the issues with the short-term rentals, the Airbnbs? Why that volume was so much higher than other rentals?
I don't think we do.
Yes,
Oh.
and I would like to not say that right
Well, you
now
know it
out loud.
anecdotally,
Yes.
right? Yeah. So when,
I know from public
Is it
safety, so I can tell you maybe later if it might be something that we have to talk about on a
Mhm.
future discussion.
okay, sorry, now we can go to the data set.
Thanks. So oh, hopefully everyone can hear me. What you're looking at here is, let's see here, the city of Middleton. Okay, so these are the property names, 1 through 16. And, oh golly, it's a different set. So, than I have in my papers. My apologies. The current owner is original, so I just have highlighted no's. So that's only 2, which is good. That means most of them are keeping theirs. Oh yeah, can you scroll over actually? My apologies. It might be over. Okay, maybe go back. Thanks.
Oh, is this what you're looking for?
Yes, okay. So the first column is property name, the second column is TIF incentive payee. The third column is the TIF district, also known as the TID district, so 5 and 3. Someone asked me today if it was mainly one or the other. It's kind of a mix. The parcel number, and then that next column is the current owner. So most of them are still the current owner is the original owner. 2 out of the 16 are not, but things happen. And the year it's sold, the addresses, and the next column, column I. Okay, so this is the dollar amount that was given in TIF to these 16 properties, which is over $43 million. And that makes me think, did we go through all the way through our PowerPoint? Maybe there was another slide. It's okay. Maybe I'm messed
Yeah,
up.
we did go through all the, I can pull up.
It's okay. So one of the things that I thought I sent you, but maybe I sent you the wrong one, shows that it's $43 million was given. And then as it shows, the number 7 in column M, the assessed value of the 16 properties, it was 14 million, give or take. I don't have a thing at the bottom, my apologies. And then the current assessed value is 249,612.
Yep.
Or 249,612,900. And then the increase in increment is about 235 million. That's the important part. So a lot of times with TIF, we have that goal to increase the increment. That goal was met. So part of what this survey was trying to do is say, okay, so did you hit the goal? Did you increase increment? Yes, we did. But what about all the other things? You know, we often talk about, you know, the value added, the life experience, how many apartments are we building, things like that. So that was part of the audit concept is what did we do with that 43 million? Of the ones that responded, or no, this was prior. So how many of them have retail space? 4 of them said yes, or 3 of them said yes. And then total apartments is over 1,500. So go to tab 2, please. Let's see here. So that's where I got the apartment vacancies is the green area. The leasing is 12 months or more. There was a couple of 6 months or more, but I kind of wound them in because they're infrequent. And then the target market was basically yes. We do have some Section 8 in a couple locations, which I actually, very cool is Section 8. There was something staff was concerned about because there is historical feelings about Section 8, but it is required by law. So we do have an average of 3% across the TIF districts, all 16 properties, but they're mainly just in 3 properties at this time. But 3%, very healthy, nothing of concern. So, and then the last column is staying, leaving, and then leaving. So if you go to lastly, the public, oh, that was my tab at the bottom.
Oh.
Public safety tab. So this is the, you're good. It would be asking over the last 12 months when the emergency responders, the directors get that, and then they can each list for their department. And then is the property manager on site, yes or no? And are they collaborative? And saying that because sometimes they have turnover, so maybe they weren't last year, but they're working with someone new and they're working on it. Or maybe they're going from a part-time property manager to a full-time property manager because of incidents that are happening. So with that, it was a great exercise, and I do want to say thank you to staff for working with me and sending out all of those surveys. And I do want to point out that staff helped me write a survey for homeowners and renters that will be launched this week because we wanted to know what apartment developers to get their survey responses and their understanding of things going on and what they did with it, but then also hear from both homeowners and apartment dwellers, like our apartment dwellers moving here for a career but expecting to move on in 2 to 3 years, and so they're not looking to buy. Are they at an age where they want to give up a house and don't want to deal with snow plowing anymore? I mean, I get it. Are they a family that are moving in, but they're looking for that house and it's not been built yet? You know, and so they're renting for a year until something is available. And to hear it from them so that as we talk with developers down the road, because often apartments are being brought to us and we're looking at it in the pipeline. And so when people say, oh, well, this is what we know, the market wants more apartments. Well, we built 1,500 just with TIF in the last decade. And if that saturation point is there, we don't really have any other way to say, hey, is this really good data? And so by asking the folks who are living in the apartments, are they wanting to buy? You know, do they want the condo? Do they want the house? Do they want the townhouse? And hear it from them. It'll at least start a conversation. And understanding, I'm now looking at Commissioner Bruce, I will work on the validity of the data. Hopefully it'll be healthier each and every time, but until we have something, we can't even start the conversation. So that's the hope. So if anyone has any questions, please ask. It does turn out it is the first in the state, to the best of our knowledge, asking those robust questions, like how many were built and what's the vacancy and what's the vacancy per like 1 bedroom versus efficiencies and things like that. And I just want to say thank you because you all inspired me as I wrote the survey.
Yeah.
Very ambitious.
Oh, thank you for doing this. It's good to have current data in front of us, even if it's not all encompassing, because some of the emails we get, I feel like the statistics that are thrown at us are grossly off, and it's nice to be able to speak to that.
Yeah,
I mean, I think
nice
there
to see
was,
this beyond the TIF, like all of the apartments
Right.
would be a really great survey, maybe every 10 years or something.
It's a great idea.
yeah. So I'm just thinking of one of the recent emails, correct me if I'm wrong, someone threw out like a 20% vacancy rate, which had to be grossly off in my mind. But
It is interesting. I will tell you that the ones closer to the highway might have more vacancy from anecdotal. It has more vacancy because they were in demand prior to the pandemic. And so, because people wanted to get on the highway and get to downtown. And so one of the surprising things is that Lake 61, which is on Lake Street, it is over 90, if not 95% full after 4 months on the market. And one of the things I learned was that in the nation, if you build an apartment building, say it has 200 units, you build an apartment building, they hope to fill it within 2 years, like towards 95%. In Dane County, it's within 1 year. It's considered a success. So to have done that at 4 months, that's why people are now looking at us and why our pipeline, I think, is so robust with apartments is because to us, they're not filling, but to the market, they think that's successful within 2 years. And so it's interesting that the vacancies are very little towards that Conservancy Lake because during the pandemic, people wanted to move there. And so if there are vacancies at 20%, my guess is it's the ones towards the highway, but they will fill, especially if we reduce the cost.
And in the case of the 20% stat, without mentioning the apartment development, they had increased their rents by 20% in 1 year.
Did they?
So, yes.
That makes sense.
And so I know people who moved because the rents went up 20%. So that's often not part of the discussion about what the
What
market.
drives it? Yeah, and that's hard. Yeah, it's hard. And the place that was doing the short-term rentals, I would be interested to know what their vacancy is now because one of the things my best guess is that it was an artificial low vacancy rate because when they had their Airbnb going, they said basically they were full. But when you take that away, then they probably had a hard time filling the rest of that. So it's something I will keep tracking of.
I would just like to note a couple things between this survey and some other numbers we saw earlier tonight. We mentioned that the school district is showing lower enrollment, and we also see 0 vacancies on those 2-bedroom apartments. And when we get proposals, we're not seeing 2 bedrooms and 3 bedrooms being built. And I know Lisa has pushed the developers asking them, why aren't you building more of the 2-bedroom units? Why aren't you building 3-bedroom units, right? When we have families that want to live here, but they have no place to put the children, that's why we're not, when you saw the survey of how many houses versus apartments, Middleton is a huge number of apartments. So if we still want to include families in our sort of inclusive planning, we need to have more apartment units that are more inclusive of families because it's just a huge part of our development.
It's tough to do.
Yeah.
I know in Madison, they, at least in some districts, they had a requirement that you had to meet a certain ratio of bedrooms, like
Oh.
overall. And I mean, that's certainly one approach. The problem, what I think drives a lot of the development kind of formula is the rental rate that they can get on a smaller apartment is so
Yeah.
much higher per
Mhm.
square foot,
Yeah, they can fill it.
and they can fill it.
So they are
Yes.
not, they don't have any incentive to build
Right.
family
Yeah,
units.
it's
It's only
different.
us asking them to do
Yeah,
it.
and-
They might include some.
And in a way, the market is telling them that there isn't that much of a demand, because if there was really that much demand, the rental rates on the bigger apartments would go up as well.
Except that there's just simply a price that people can't afford to pay anymore,
Mhm.
right?
That is true.
Yeah.
That is true. So I don't know. I think I think it's a very tough issue. I agree. I'd like to see more larger apartments, but to get developers to do it, we're going to have the same kind of discussions that we had today about zoning and all these other
Cost.
things. It's just cost, yeah. And so I don't know what the answer is.
Before the pandemic, I heard of one example, and maybe there were two in the building. I know for sure there was one of where at one of our apartment buildings next to the golf course, there's only one really now. A family bought or rented one unit, and then for themselves, and then their teenage kids got the unit next door to them.
Mm.
So.
Like when we get a hotel.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, but that's how they had more space
Yeah,
and they
yeah.
could afford the
They,
two leases.
they could do two
Yeah.
apartments.
Yeah.
Wow.
Interesting.
So I wonder how often that happens. I'm sure it doesn't happen often, but it shows
Well,
the demand.
Yeah, I'm glad you're sharing that example, because I did know in the pandemic where families, they would go and rent an apartment because they needed to go somewhere to work. And I was like,
Mhm.
that's like $1,400 a month that you're pushing it out because of the like co-location stuff. And they said it, so they didn't have to clean that one because the kids could run around and it would be quiet. And I was just like, but also it's taking then housing off the market. And so
Mhm.
it's just one of those reasons that maybe that's why I wanted to do the survey was what are we doing? How are we using these spaces? And I have heard of some folks that are singles who want the 2-bedroom apartment. And one guy I was talking to said for his bikes. And I was like, well, don't you need to telework and have it for your office? Because that's often what I hear is I need an office because their work requires it or something. And he's like, well, yeah, that too. But really it's for my bikes and then my hiking equipment and my snow equipment. And I'm like, I get it. Okay, so we're building two, but at the same time, then we're not putting more housing, in the
Mhm.
family. Because then if you think about it, someone like me with kids,
Mhm.
do you need that 3rd bedroom to do the
Yeah,
things?
so
And
maybe we should be asking if they're including storage units in their buildings when we're looking at the reviews, because I actually haven't been asking that question.
No, I
I
haven't
haven't
either.
either.
I've only been asking about bike parking.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
Are we promoting the co-working space as well in Middleton? That could, maybe some people don't even know that we have a co-working space in Middleton.
It's a great point.
Where is it?
It's in the Harbor Athletic Club, like management building.
Mhm,
in that
mhm.
corner. That's what is that, 2nd floor, 3rd floor?
Mhm.
That's nice. It's got kind of a lake view and it's by the bus stop, Conservancy.
I heard that's why they're getting lots of cars parking over there and they're full, which is good,
Oh, that's-
or close to full. So maybe a new spot will have to happen.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's a really good point, because in that place, the family wouldn't have gotten the apartment to send the working spouses when they were rotating. They could have taken the co-working. So maybe that's something we need to then work with our business community as we're planning, is to make sure we're growing and we're supporting it. But
Well, even like these mixed use buildings, maybe, if they're not interested in really having that mixed use feature, promoting the suggestion of, have you considered co-working units in the building? That would be very convenient for families.
great idea. With that, I'm done with this topic, but if anyone wants to ask follow-up questions, you're welcome to, or another day. I'm really glad we had that discussion on what we're doing really well, where we can improve, and I was even thinking, Alder Haniro, maybe we can ask Brian to think about like a task force.
I was thinking we need to have some kind of follow-up to, and I do think letting the zoning code be implemented for a little bit, and, you know, obviously the developers who are here for the projects we heard about, or we were hearing about, it's too late for the most part because they're PDDs, but yeah, I do think we need to have some kind of follow-up and figure out what are some best practices that we can try to implement. And if, you know, budget season's coming up, if we need to hire more staff, let's figure out how to make that happen.
That's
And we do have the subdivision ordinance. Isn't that getting rewritten right now too?
It
We
will
ju-
be this year.
We just
yeah.
signed the agreement revised as
Yeah.
requested.
So,
We signed it today.
Oh, fantastic.
so I think that'll go a long way as well.
It'll be really great. It looks like the next topic is the request from the Committee of the Whole for input on committees and commission structures. And I'm going to ask staff to lead this part. I know we've talked about this, I think previously in Plan Commission, although I may have gotten it confused, but I see the frequency of the meeting. I understand that we cannot meet monthly or quarterly, although sometimes I would be excited to maybe have less planning mission, but we are barreling through at 2.5 hours, so I think you cannot go any more sparse on that. Committee consolidation, I know that we are statutory requirement, so that is our limitation. And I think that leads us to the evaluation of committee liaison position.
Right, yeah. So basically for Plan Commission, I think we're only gonna discuss the liaison since so much of it is state statutes.
May I just make one comment about frequency? I totally agree. We can't change the frequency. It would be very helpful if it's possible for staff. It would be helpful to get the packet like a day or two earlier than we do, just
Okay.
because they're usually pretty long and it would be nice to have that extra time. But I mean, if that puts you all in a bind, I don't want to do that, but
We had been, about a year ago, we were aiming for Thursday and had some success with that. It has slipped to Friday for the last half year or so. I think are trying to get them out a little earlier. So,
Maybe because of zoning. Zoning took up a
It-
lot of,
yeah, I think
last half year.
we've started turning the corner and I think this packet came out a little earlier in the day on Friday. It wasn't at the end. So I mean, well, I'm just saying
That's improvement.
we're making
I'll take
progress.
baby steps.
Making progress.
Okay, good
I
to know.
appreciate
But that's
it.
good feedback and, you know, some committees put out their agendas just a day or two before. And we obviously, in the interest of transparency and giving people time to prepare, want to do more than that. So, and these are weighty topics that we have.
Mhm.
So I appreciate the suggestion and I'm sure Abby will go back to aiming for Thursday.
Thank you.
Yeah, so going back to the committee structure, since so much of it is based off of state statute, you know, the number of members and you know, how frequently we meet, a lot of that is kind of, you know, based on our development patterns and all of that as well. Basically, the only thing we can really discuss is the liaison. So we have a liaison from Parks, Nick. Yeah, Nick is our, yeah.
The chair.
He's the Parks Chair, and so he represents Parks Department or Parks Committee. And then we have Alder Haniro from Council, and then the Mayor. And then basically the only thing is that there have to be at least 3 citizen members. And so I believe that's Aaron, Gretchen, and Chris, who are our citizen members. But we can also discuss, you know, if there needs to be any other liaisons or some kind of
Well, we
know.
have liaisons from this commission to,
Right.
I'm the Ped Bike and Transit and Commissioner Bruce is the Workforce Housing liaison. And I love being on Ped Bike and Transit. I will say, I don't necessarily see the value of having a liaison from this committee to Ped Bike and Transit. I think the things we need to get input from Ped Bike and Transit on are things that one of us could just go to that meeting that month, to provide some background if we have a question for them. So that's one. And I think workforce housing is different. But just the nature of Ped Bike Transit, I would suggest that might be something we consider paring back.
Do you agree on the workforce housing? Do you find it valuable to stay on it?
I suppose that if it's a goal for the city to increase our workforce housing and make that a priority, then yes, I guess it's important for the plan commission to have have somebody there. I think that does make some sense. I'm not in favor of a lot of overlap in the committees, to tell you the truth. I think there's more efficient ways of handling it.
Yeah, that was my point.
And just so you know, by statute, the CDA has workforce housing under it, if I remember correctly. So that was something we had talked about in another committee discussion, is not saying that will go under CDA here in this city, because right now they're separate, but that might be an evolving thing in time. So maybe for now, it'd be good to keep the plan commission person on there, but as it evolves, that might be something we could look at.
I'm with Commissioner Bruce. I think we have a lot of overlap on committees that may have made sense at the time. People were just maybe thinking, covering all the bases and making sure nobody was left out. But I sketched out once, like on a mind map, I plotted the relationship between water resources, the stormwater utility, conservancy, parks, public works, and it was
Was it like this?
it was scary. Yeah. I
Yes.
mean, it like you could be appointed to one committee and wind up being on 4 different committees because of the way it's set up. So, and then that just doesn't seem, and ironically, I hear a lot that communication between the committees, all the committees, isn't what it could be. And it's like, but we have all these liaisons and we have council members on each one. So, they're,
We can only discuss what's on the agenda.
Right.
So that doesn't really help communication. We're not allowed to talk to each other outside of
Yeah,
the open meeting.
that's true.
Do we still have somebody on the Westport zoning?
I was just going to say,
as
I was
well?
going to add that to your list. There's 3
Oh, yeah.
members from this body that are on the joint zoning committee.
Yeah.
I imagine there's nothing we can do about that. You need to have equal representation
Yeah,
from Middleton and Westport.
Right. We have 3 members from Middleton, 3 from Westport. Although Westport's, I don't believe are all necessarily plan commission members. They've broadened their,
Oh, interesting.
yeah, I want to double check that, but that's because they've recently gone to a system of having backup, like a substitute. Like if somebody can't make it, a regular member can't make it, they can appoint someone else temporarily. So they've been a little more flexible with their representation.
Open-minded.
I note that Commissioner Adams isn't here, so we should get his input on the PRFC chair. But for the other commissioners, Alder John Schaefer, who used to be on the Plan Commission because he was chair, he noted that a lot of the time, was it signs? He said sometimes it made sense for parks to be there, but most of the time it was like sign approvals, which, he was exaggerating, I'm sure. But I thought that was an interesting point, and I'd like to hear what Commissioner Adams has to say, because there too, if it's important, I know the Parks Commission sets the fees and that comes through us then, but is there a better way, a more efficient way to have that relationship and that coordination rather than making someone attend two more Parks already meets twice a month, right? So that's
Yeah.
doubling the meeting load. And that's, for some people, that's great. For others, it's a barrier. And I feel like we need to get his input on that. And then one thing I wanted to ask, Mark might know this, why, so I looked at other municipalities ordinances. I looked at Madison, and Daphne, you're right that the state statute does identify what we see on the screen, but the last sentence of paragraph A says the council may by ordinance provide that the membership of the commission shall be as provided thereunder, meaning we can decide ourselves. And so Madison has 9 people, 3 of whom are council members, and then the mayor has the option to appoint themselves or a designee. So on a 9-member commission, at least 1/3 are going to be elected officials. And I bring that up because there was a comment made at the council meeting in connection with the proposed change to let the mayor in Middleton not have to be a member of the plan commission, but rather either be a member or appoint a designee. And the comment was made that for accountability purposes, this alder felt it was important for, for the elected mayor to be a part of the discussion. And the more I thought about it, the more I thought, well, why don't we have more alder people? If that's the case, if, you want it to be a more, a body that has more representation that's directly accountable to the people through voting, why don't we have 2 alders? Because 1/3 of the Madison Commission is elected officials. And then, Mark, the question to you is, why do we have the plan commission member elected by the council instead of appointed by the mayor and approved by the council like the other appointments?
I don't know. It's been like that for as long as I can remember.
Okay.
But I don't know, in skimming the state statute here.
Yeah, again, we have the authority
Right.
to do it differently, and
It's been our custom for decades, literally, to have it this way. The overlap with PRFC is fairly unique to our city.
Yeah.
We also, I know, traditionally have tried to have people with specialized areas of expertise, design, architect, experience. So typically that doesn't necessarily have to be a council member. That oftentimes is not a member of the council. So we have historically had people in the community from various perspectives serving in the committee. We're not required to have an architect, but I think it's good practice. Actually, I think our ordinance may even say, the city ordinance may even have language to that effect in there. I didn't prepare for this meeting.
Says you have to have experience.
Yeah.
And
Persons that recognize experience. Yep, exactly. Experience and qualifications. So
I want to point out that, I know that the parks, the chair of parks coming and being on our plan commission is unusual in the metro area for as much as I know. But I want to say that whoever designed the statute to be this, or the ordinance to be this way, it really worked out. I hope it worked out the way they envisioned, which is a beautiful layout of green space, parks and conservancy throughout the city. As we were developing, I always hear about the infill that happened between the downtown and the eastern side, which they just call like Madison, 2.0. But the infill that happened, there's beautiful parks, so many locations. And I know we're not perfect. It's not, perfectly placed and things like that. But man, I have enjoyed going to see them all. And if that was the goal when it was laid out, they did a great job.
I know back in the 90s, there was a lot of tension, a lot of discussion, I'll say, and some tension about the city accepting parkland that wasn't suitable for active recreation uses. So getting, as some would say, swampland, or, things that the developers like, well, I can't build on that anyway. I'll give that to the city for parks. And so that was part of the culture of making sure that parks was at the table. I'm not saying that's why it was done, but that certainly, to address your point, Mayor, that was there was a specific effort to make sure that we got quality land from development. You know, Red Tail Ridge is a good example. We're not getting the stormwater pond for parkland. That's a separate area now. So we have 2 parks that are proposed that are, you know, I think much better quality than what we've gotten in some projects years ago. And also, lest you think we haven't made improvements over the years, we used to have a committee called the Sign Design Review Committee. And that had a member of the Plan Commission. And when I joined the city, we had that. And after a few years, I thought, yeah, no, that's just a bridge. You know, it's just going a little far. So we got rid of that and
We merged it.
Well,
Absorbed it.
we
That's great.
were creative in our interpretation of the ordinance and said that we could administratively approve signs in some degree, but the ones in planned unit developments were Planning Commission still. Anyway, I digress. But we've made some improvements, but at the same time, we've added ped bike transit. We've added, you know, we've done some things that have reflected the desires of the community. Whether we have a liaison to ped bike transit, I can see Alder Hanairo's point. I think the desire there was to make sure that there's membership of that on that committee that reflects that we get the bicycle accommodations and pedestrian accommodations in our plans that are approved by development as part of development. But now we have an ordinance that helps implement that. So, you know, I think there is opportunity for some further improvement. That's the purpose why this was before you today.
I just want to point out that Community Campus Commission has been on hold for a while, but I was the representative on that. I will be leaving and stepping down. So I hope you found somebody else to start in May. But somebody may need to jump in there when that starts up again.
Thank you.
I just wanted to note, I can't obviously directly speak for Commissioner Adams, but having been on parks previously with him and having had these discussions, I do strongly feel it is important for a parks representative to continue on Plan Commission. We just have the opportunity to get a lot more citizen feedback. And I think part of it is because the parks meetings are a lot easier to attend. The longest one I ever was at was an hour and a half. So citizens are much more engaged and, you know, it's a part of their direct community. So they're much more likely to speak out. And there's a lot of issues that then, you know, stopped in parks and we handed it off to the then Plan Commission members or council members that you would like to be able to see through. So having that voice on Plan Commission, I feel like is very valuable. And I know Nick enjoys it so far.
That's great. Thank you for sharing that. All right. Any other comments? Hearing none, I'm going to go ahead and move to adjourn. Thank you for everyone for your patience and your insights.
Thanks for that housing update. That was really interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks,
Bye,
Chris.